I went back in time to rebuild one of the worst AC Milan sides in history. Little did I know that would kick off an insane series of events that would lead to triumph, heartbreak, and ultimately redemption. So sit back and enjoy the tale of the legendary Italian manager, Antonio Andolini. The 2014-15 season marked one of the darkest chapters in AC Milan's history. Milan finished in 10th place in the Serie A, winning just 13 matches, on their way to the worst league finish since 1998. And for the first time in nearly 2 decades, Milan failed to qualify for any European competition, a dramatic fall for a club that was once known for their Champions League glory. Unfortunately, this season was the beginning of a long period of decline that featured constant managerial changes, poor recruitment, and financial struggles that turned Milan from European giants to a club that was stuck in the Europa League. But what if things had gone differently? In this video, I'll be revisiting FIFA 15 to rebuild Milan back to the top of Italian football. This will be a narrative-driven career mode save that will provide a story of how an unknown manager attempted to save the Rossoneri. So let's turn back the clock and begin this story. By the start of the 2014-15 season, AC Milan's most recent golden era was well and truly over after a disappointing 8th place finish. Long gone were the days of squads that were filled with world-class talent, while financial struggles saw the remaining superstars sold off. Meanwhile, young promising players had failed to live up to expectations. Even club legend Kaká had departed for the MLS, and Mario Balotelli, Milan's most recent talisman, was sold to Liverpool for £20 million. Despite an attempt to rebuild, Milan's squad was left painfully mediocre, lacking a true superstar with an aging core and underwhelming youth prospects. Unsurprisingly, Milan endured a disastrous season, finishing 10th place in Serie A, 35 points behind the eventual champions Juventus, and yet again without European football. Their financial struggles only deepened as they spent 5 years in an endless cycle of rebuilds and failures. However, what if Milan had taken a different path? Instead of years of mediocrity, what if Milan had gone with a bold managerial appointment, an attempt to quicken their revival? It's the summer of 2014, and Milan are fresh off a disappointing 8th place finish under club legend Clarence Seedorf. Reports from the media all but confirm that another club legend, Filippo Inzaghi, will be hired as a new manager to turn the team around. However, the footballing world was stunned when Milan unveiled their new manager, the virtually unknown Antonio Andolini. The announcement sent shockwaves through Italian football. Few had even heard of Andolini, who hailed from the small town of Corleone, Sicily. Doubts immediately arose about his qualification, experience, and most importantly, his ability to manage a club of Milan's stature. No one knew how he landed one of Italy's most prestigious jobs, but what they were certain about was the challenge ahead. Andolini's first order of business was trimming the team's bloated squad, even if it meant accepting low transfer fees, as the squad had 8 center-backs, none younger than 27, and a similarly aging group of 4 defensive midfielders. The first departures were the veteran center-back duo of 33-year-old Christian Zaccardo and 34-year-old Daniele Bornera, followed by the aging Ghanaian midfield pair of Sully Montari and Michael Essien, with the 4 sales collectively generating just £5 million. Andolini's ruthlessness continued with the exit of Felipe Maxes, who joined Marseille, leaving Milan with a more manageable core of just 5 center-backs. Further up the pitch, Italian striker Pizzini was deemed surplus to requirements and sold for £4.2 million, with the funds earmarked for attacking reinforcements. Just as Andolini seemed content with his squad, a surprising bidding war erupted between Arsenal and Tottenham for Alessio Cerci. Once electric at Fiorentina and Torino, Cerci had struggled since his move to Atletico Madrid and his subsequent arrival in Milan. Although Andolini initially planned to revive his career, the bidding war represented too big of an opportunity to miss. In the end, Arsenal secured Cerci's services for £18.5 million. Following the numerous defensive departures, Andolini turned his attention to rebuilding the back line. Despite already having 5 center-backs, he brought in Cameroonian center-back Nicolas Nkulu from Marseille for £10 million, with Philip Maxis going the other way. With defensive signings completed, the focus shifted to Milan's limited attack. The first major addition was Andre Schürrle, arriving from Chelsea for £15 million, providing a versatile and dynamic option to Milan's front line. However, the late sale of Alessio Cerci opened the door for a marquee signing, providing Andolini with the funds to address a glaring need for a top-class striker. Andolini set his sights on French sensation Alexandre Lacazette. Lacazette, however, did not come cheap, with a Rossoneri splashing out £29.5 million to secure his services. By the end of the window, Milan had undergone a dramatic squad overhaul, and excitement among the fans was palpable. Most importantly, all transfers were completed before Milan's opening league match against Lazio, allowing the footballing world to see what the new Milan squad were capable of.
Milan kicked off their campaign at home against Lazio, with fans and pundits eager to see how inexperienced manager Antonio Andolini would handle his managerial debut. Summer signings Nkulu, Schürrle and Lacazette were all handed their first starts, adding to the anticipation surrounding the new era at the club. It was Andre Schürrle who stole the show, winning a penalty in the 28th minute before confidently converting it himself to put Milan in front. In the second half, a well-worked corner routine saw Keisuke Honda rise highest to head home Milan's second, sealing a 2-0 victory and a perfect start to the season. However, it was a frustrating debut for Alexandre Lacazette. The highly anticipated signing had several chances, but failed to find the net, leaving him still searching for his first goal in Milan colours.
The comfortable opening win appeared to justify the gamble on Andolini, but optimism quickly faded as Milan managed just one draw and 2 losses in their next 3 games, leaving them in 13th place at the start of the season. Among these setbacks was a concerning 2-0 loss away to the reigning Serie A champions Juventus, a match that exposed the gap in quality between the two sides. Despite registering twice as many shots as Juve, Milan's finishing let them down. Gianluigi Buffon produced a string of great saves while the woodwork denied them on multiple occasions. In contrast, Juventus punished Milan's inefficiency with ruthless finishing, delivering a harsh reality check on Milan's long road back to re-establishing themselves among Italy's elite. After a shaky start, doubts grew over Andolini's appointment, but from late September to November, Milan regained their footing with 7 straight wins, climbing to second place with 25 points, although only 1 win came against a top-half team. That win came in a hard-fought 2-1 victory over Fiorentina, where Alexandre Lacazette finally broke his 8-game goal drought. Milan's winning streak would come to an end in dramatic fashion during Andolini's first ever Milan derby.
Antonio Andolini's first Milan derby was one to remember, as both sides battled under the rain in a high-stakes clash for second place and a chance to keep their title hopes alive. Just 4 minutes in, controversy struck as Milan were awarded a penalty. Replay suggested the Inter defender got the ball before the man, but the decision stood. Andre Schürrle stepped up and converted, netting his 3rd goal of the season to give Milan an early lead. Inter responded in the 30th minute when a defensive lapse allowed Rodrigo Palacio to pounce, bringing the visitors level and leaving Andolini frustrated with his team's lack of focus. Milan struck back just before half-time. Mattia De Sciglio's brilliant through ball found Andrea Poli, who fired home with an emphatic finish to restore the lead. However, the second half brought frustration for Milan. A needless foul by Nicolas Nkulu just outside the box led to a stunning Hernanes free kick, making it 2-2. Yet another costly defensive lapse for Andolini's side in a crucial game. In the dying moments, Marco van Ginkel played Lacazette through on goal with a golden chance to win it, but his tame effort was easily saved. The match ended in a stalemate, and with both teams dropping points as Lazio took advantage, leapfrogging them in the standings.
After the derby disappointment, Milan took 7 points from their final 4 games in 2014, including a 2-0 win over Napoli, which was highlighted by Andre Schürrle's spectacular acrobatic goal. However, Milan limped to the year's end with a narrow 1-0 loss to Roma, worsened by Nkulu's 2-month injury, leaving Milan vulnerable at the back. Meanwhile, Lacazette continued to struggle, managing just 4 goals in 16 appearances. Milan ended the year in third, 8 points behind Juventus, as Andolini earned praise for revitalizing the squad. With limited funds and N'Koulou set to return by mid-February, Milan entered the winter window with no plans for signings, confident of their strong league position. They started the year strong, winning 6 of the 7 matches in January. Unfortunately, their momentum was halted when Alex suffered a long-term injury, leaving them without both starting center-backs. Things only got worse in a 1-0 loss to Lazio, where a series of comical defensive blunders gifted the opposition the winner. To make things worse, backup center-back Adil Rami dislocated his shoulder during the build-up to the goal, which saw him join Alex and N'Koulou on the injury list, as injuries were beginning to threaten to derail Milan's season. Despite calls for reinforcements, Andolini prioritized long-term financial stability and made no signings, despite having just 3 fit center-backs. Meanwhile, a bright spot was Stefan El Shaarawy, who found sensational form with 8 goals in January, establishing himself as the main man in Milan's attack. Andolini's decision to stick with the existing squad was tested in the quarter-final of the Coppa Italia against Juventus, with Milan fielding a shaky center-back pairing of Paletta and Zapata.
Milan travelled to a snow-covered Allianz Stadium with an opportunity to book their place in the Coppa Italia semi-finals. In a season full of challenges, this match would become one of their defining moments. Just 20 minutes in, Alexandre Lacazette finally ended his 9-match goal drought, rising highest to meet an André Schürrle cross with a well-placed header. But hopes of a resurgence for the Frenchman were short-lived, as a costly turnover in midfield led to a swift Juventus counter-attack, ruthlessly finished by Alvaro Morata. A clumsy challenge from Giorgio Chiellini on Keisuke Honda gifted Milan a penalty, and Jeremy Mene stepped up to calmly slot home his first goal of the season. The Rossoneri emerged victorious, securing a spot in the semi-finals against Fiorentina. More than just a cup win, this was a statement. Despite their injury crisis, Milan were not backing down. They were determined to fight on all fronts.
The Rossoneri would book their place in the Coppa Italia final in emphatic fashion, dismantling Fiorentina 5-0 in aggregate, and earning Andolini plenty of plaudits. The triumph was short-lived as injuries continued, with Matteo De Sciglio breaking his collarbone, sidelining him for 7 weeks. The injury crisis would only deepen when Nigel de Jong pulled his calf in a narrow 1-0 loss to Juventus. The loss highlighted the effects of the injury crisis, as backup left-back Loni Pablo Armero lost track of Carlos Tevez at the back post, leading to the game's only goal. Despite the setbacks, Milan stayed in the title race, just 4 points behind Juventus. N'Koulou's return boosted the Rossoneri, as back-to-back wins propelled them to the top of the table for the first time all season. Unfortunately, Milan's stay at the top was brief, as a costly red card for N'Koulou left the defense exposed ahead of the clash against Chievo Verona. Milan started the game strong as Andrea Poli gave Milan the lead with a well-placed header. However, a goalkeeping error from Diego Lopez gifted Verona an equalizer. Then, in the dying moments, André Schürrle's misplaced pass led to a quick counterattack, allowing Verona to snatch a shocking 2-1 victory. To make matters worse, El Shaarawy was sidelined for 3 weeks, leaving Milan reliant on the out-of-form Lacazette. The injury crisis was beginning to take its toll on Milan as they endured a 5-game winless streak. The team looked exhausted and out of ideas. The worst defeat came in a 2-0 loss away to Fiorentina, where Milan barely put up a fight in a hostile environment.
Sitting in third place and 6 points behind league leader Juventus, Milan aimed to keep their title hopes alive, but they faced a tough challenge away from home, as Fiorentina would score just 2 minutes into the game. Then, a brilliant run from Mohamed Salah carved through Milan's defence, setting up Alessandro Diamanti for the second goal, leaving the Rossoneri shell-shocked. The match ended 2-0 as Milan faltered once again in their pursuit of the title.
Milan's slump saw them drop from 2nd place down to 5th place, ruining their title run and putting their Champions League hopes in jeopardy. With Andolini under immense pressure, the Rossoneri entered the Milan derby, desperate to salvage their season.
Amid their recent slump, the Milan derby offered a golden opportunity for Milan to regain control in the Champions League qualification race. Optimism grew among the fans as the injury crisis had eased, with El Shaarawy returning to the lineup. As expected, the derby was a fiery contest, with both sides battling for a Champions League spot. Inter struck first from the penalty spot after Nkulu's late challenge on Rodrigo Palacio, leaving Milan with the daunting task of chasing the game to salvage their season. Milan pushed relentlessly for an equaliser, coming agonisingly close when Lacazette rattled the crossbar in the 80th minute. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, an unlikely hero stepped up. Mattia Destro, who had struggled all season, found the back of the net in the 90th minute, his 3rd goal of the campaign, to rescue a crucial point for Milan. While it wasn't the victory Andolini had hoped for, the late point prevented Milan from falling too far behind in the race for Champions League qualification, heading into a difficult final stretch of the season.
Stuck in 5th place, but with the injury crisis easing, Milan aimed to close the gap before a crucial showdown with 3rd place Roma. Needing flawless results, Andolini's men delivered with wins over Udinese and Genoa, setting up a crucial clash with 6th place Napoli.
With a season-defining clash against Roma looming, Milan headed to Naples knowing that only a victory would keep their Champions League hopes alive. In a tense and cagey affair, neither side found a breakthrough until the 74th minute, when Schürrle won a penalty after being brought down by Raúl Albiol. The German winger stepped up and calmly slotted it home, seemingly securing a crucial 3 points for Milan. However, just 7 minutes later, disaster struck as 5'4" Lorenzo Insigne somehow rose above 2 Milan defenders to power home a stunning header, leaving the Rossoneri stunned. However, Milan responded instantly. Little-used club captain Riccardo Montolivo pounced on a rebound from a Schürrle shot to restore the lead. In the dying moments, Milan put the game to bed with a clinical counter-attack, finished off by Schürrle, sealing a massive victory and keeping their Champions League dreams alive.
The win in Naples would set the stage for a dramatic end to the season, as 4th place Milan hosted 3rd place Roma, with just 2 points separating the sides. While it had been a grueling season for Andolini with endless injuries and constant criticism from fans and media, with just 4 games left, he had a chance to guide Milan back to the Champions League.
Heading into the crucial clash, Milan suffered a major setback as starting right-back Ignazio Abate fractured his ribs in training, ruling him out for the rest of the season. Despite the blow, confidence among fans remained high given the team's recent form. However, when the lineup was announced, confusion spread among supporters and pundits alike. Andolini had abandoned the 4-3-3 that had defined Milan's season, instead opting for a 4-4-2 diamond. The tactical shift appeared to be a pragmatic attempt to neutralize Roma's fluid 4-3-3 by overloading the midfield, but the gamble backfired spectacularly. Within 30 minutes, Milan found themselves 2-0 down in their most pivotal game of the season. Desperate to salvage the match, Andolini scrapped his initial approach before halftime, switching to an aggressive 3-4-3. The change provided a glimmer of hope, as André Schürrle nodded in a well-worked set-piece just before the break. Milan threw everything forward in the second half, pushing relentlessly for an equaliser, but despite their efforts, the breakthrough never came. The match ended 2-1, leaving Milan 5 points behind Roma, a gap they would ultimately fail to close. In the most crucial match of the season, Andolini had gambled and lost, his tactical misstep proving costly in Milan's pursuit of Champions League football.
A deflated Milan managed just 5 points from their last 3 games, finishing in 5th place and missing out on the Champions League qualification. Milan's late season collapse sparked backlash, with Andolini facing massive criticism for his naive tactics against Roma and his reluctance to reinforce the squad in January despite the injury crisis. The expensive signing of Lacazette also faced backlash, after the Frenchman only scored 9 goals all season. Despite the late season collapse, Milan still had a shot at redemption in the Coppa Italia final against Napoli. It was a chance for Andolini to salvage the season and claim his first ever silverware.
Milan met Napoli in the Coppa Italia final. Seeking redemption after their late season collapse had cost them Champions League qualification. They couldn't have asked for a better start. Just 2 minutes in, Andrea Poli unleashed a stunning strike to give Milan the lead. From that moment, they never looked back. Poli doubled his tally with a well-placed header before Alexandre Lacazette, desperate for a confidence boost, finally found the net. But the night belonged to Poli. The midfielder capped off a career-defining performance by completing his hat-trick with a spectacular 35-yard free kick, sealing Milan's dominance. A resounding 4-0 victory secured Milan's first trophy under Andolini, bringing a turbulent season to a triumphant close. Despite the disappointment of missing out on Champions League qualification, fans took solace in seeing the Rossoneri regain their taste for silverware. The triumph provided a glimmer of hope that Andolini was still the right man to guide Milan back to the top of Italian football.
The 2014-15 season was a roller coaster for Milan that was marked by highs and crushing lows. A disastrous second-half collapse not only cost them the title, but also a Champions League spot. An injury-hit squad earned just 24 points from their final 17 games, finishing 5th place, 3 points behind Inter, and 11 points adrift of the champions Juventus. Despite a Coppa Italia triumph, fans were left wondering what might have been. As expected, Juventus dominated the end-of-season awards, with Carlos Tevez crowned the Serie A most valuable player, along with picking up the Golden Boot, while Buffon claimed the Golden Glove. Paul Pogba narrowly missed out on the top assist provider award, losing out to Gervinho on a tiebreaker. Unsurprisingly, Juventus had 6 players in the team of the season. Meanwhile, Andrea Poli and Stefan El Shaarawy both earned a selection, thanks to their impressive goal contributions throughout the campaign. El Shaarawy was named Milan's Player of the Season, finishing as the club's top scorer with 16 goals and 2 assists in 35 appearances. Andre Schürrle was a close second, contributing the second highest goals and the team high in assists, proving to be a valuable signing. Meanwhile, Andrea Poli had a standout season with a stellar goal contribution, delivering crucial goals from the midfield. His midfield partner, Gianmarco Bonaventura, also provided plenty of goal contributions. Meanwhile, Lacazette struggled with consistency, managing just 13 goal contributions, well below his hefty price tag. Despite a disappointing end to the season, Antonio Andolini's job remained safe, for now. However, doubts remain about his ability to restore Milan to the top, especially as he faced a crucial summer window. Milan saw Destro, Van Ginkel, Bonchetti, and Armero return to their parent clubs, while Andolini's first priority was offloading returning loanees to clear space for new signings. Serie A veterans Alessandro Matri and Antonio Nacarino were sold for a combined £5 million. Meanwhile, Fernando Torres returned from his loan spell with Atletico Madrid, with rumors that his former side was interested in re-signing the striker permanently, while Slovenian winger Walter Birza and Italian midfielder Riccardo Sapronera joined Lazio for a combined £7.8 million. Meanwhile, after their disastrous performance in Milan's late-season collapse, Christian Zapata and Gabriel Paletta were swiftly offloaded for a combined £8.5 million. Unexpectedly, vice-captain Nigel de Jong requested a transfer, seeking Champions League football, with Andolini reluctantly granting his wish, allowing the 31-year-old to join Valencia for £6 million, a move that disappointed fans, losing a key figure. The final departure of the summer was French forward Jeremy Menez, who was frustrated with his limited role as Andolini preferred Lacazette due to his defensive work rate, which saw the Frenchman join Tottenham for £16.5 million. The absence of Champions League football made it challenging for Andolini to attract the players he wanted. Although there were rumors about former talisman Zlatan Ibrahimovic potentially leaving PSG, he remained in Paris, as Andolini was left to rely on the aging Fernando Torres and the underwhelming Alexander Lacazette to lead the line. Midway through the window, Milan made their first signing, acquiring Chelsea outcast Mohamed Salah for £16 million. Despite his successful loan spell at Fiorentina, fans were skeptical, especially given the club's earlier links to bigger names. This sentiment was further fueled by the arrival of 22-year-old Luis Alberto from Liverpool for £9 million. with Andolini referring to him as a project player. Another Premier League cast-off, Leroy Fer, joined for £15.8 million, a risky investment for an unproven talent. Additionally, Alex Song arrived at the San Siro for £12 million, filling the vacant defensive midfielder role. Andolini would finally secure a major signing by bringing in disgruntled centre-back Jan Vertonghen from Tottenham for £26 million. As Andolini felt that the squad was ready to push for the Champions League qualification and even win the Scudetto, aiming to silence critics who doubted his ability as an inexperienced manager. Milan kicked off their season in the Supercoppa against Juventus, a major early test for Andolini's side. Juventus took the lead through Paul Pogba after a defensive lapse from Milan. However, Milan quickly responded as Abate's solo run won a penalty, which Andre Schürrle converted from the spot. Abate continued to terrorize the Juventus defense, setting up Lacazette for a brilliant tap-in, while Mo Salah played through Bonaventura, who sealed the win with a final goal, giving Milan a 3-1 victory, claiming their first silverware of the season and sending a strong message in the title race. Milan had a flying start to the season, winning each of their first 4 games. Lacazette was in great form, scoring 3 goals in the opening 2 league matches, sparking optimism among fans that the Frenchman had finally settled into life in the Serie A. Milan traveled to Palermo in fine form, with fans expecting a routine victory. Instead, they would witness the Serie A match of the season.
What was expected to be a routine away trip turned into a disaster for Milan as they travelled to Sicily to face Palermo. With Alexandre Lacazette having started the previous 2 games, Andolini opted to give Fernando Torres his first start of the campaign. The Spaniard repaid his manager's faith in style, scoring a brilliant looping header from a De Siglio cross to open his league account. Palermo responded in the 35th minute when a header from a corner struck the post before Simon Mackinock pounced on the rebound to equalise. Just before half-time, a quick Milan counter-attack left Torres one-on-one with his defender, and he clinically finished to restore the lead. However, Milan's advantage was short-lived as Palermo immediately hit back from the kickoff, capitalising on a defensive lapse from Andrea Poli, a mistake that left Andolini furious on the touchline. In the 66th minute, Alex Song played a perfectly weighted pass to Mohamed Salah, who slotted home his first goal of the campaign to make it 3-2. Milan seemed to be in control, coasting toward victory, until a seemingly harmless free kick from nearly 40 yards out turned disastrous. Once again, poor marking on a set piece allowed Palermo to equalise, exposing Milan's defensive frailties. Then, in the 90th minute, Mackinock struck again, this time with a stunning goal of the season contender, to seal an improbable 4-3 victory for Palermo, leaving Milan in shock. Despite Torres' brace, Milan suffered their first defeat of the season, with widespread criticism directed at their defensive vulnerabilities after Palermo's improbable comeback.
After a disappointing loss to Palermo, Milan bounced back with a hard-fought 1-0 victory over Fiorentina, as captain Montolivo capitalized off a rebound from Lacazette's shot. The win helped restore confidence ahead of a crucial away game against Juventus.
Heading into the game, Milan sat in 5th place after 4 matches, just 1 point behind surprise league leaders Torino. The match also marked the first tactical shift from Andolini, as he adjusted his system to better accommodate Alex Song, who had struggled as a lone pivot. Opting for a 4-4-2 setup, Andolini paired Song in a double pivot while deploying Lacazette alongside Torres up front. Much like their Supercoppa clash, Juventus struck first, this time through Javier Pastore. However, Milan drew level after a moment of brilliance from Torres, who set up Schürrle for a stunning volley past Buffon to level the score. In the 77th minute, Torres turned from provider to scorer, finishing a well-placed shot to put Milan ahead. Milan sealed the victory in style when substitute Honda weaved through the Juventus defence with an incredible solo run, slotting home to secure a statement 3-1 win. Andolini's first victory over Juventus in the league sent a clear message to the league that they were serious about a title charge.
Milan's victory over Juventus signaled their title ambitions, setting the stage for an impressive October run, with 5 wins, 1 draw, and just a single loss. The stretch featured a tough 0-0 Milan derby and a dominant 3-0 win over Lacazette's former club, Lyon. The biggest surprise, however, was the resurgence of Fernando Torres. Forming a lethal partnership with Lacazette, the Spaniard scored 4 goals in 4 games, bringing his season tally to 7. After years of inconsistency, El Niño was back to his best. Milan's most pivotal October match came in Naples, where they sat second, just 1 point behind surprise leaders Torino. Controversy struck early as De Sciglio clumsily brought down Higuain in a box, yet the referee played on, sparking outrage from the home crowd. While the missed penalty dominated the headlines, Milan capitalized on the fortune. Schürrle's clinical finish broke the deadlock, followed by a slick team move that saw Lacazette set up Torres for a tap-in. The Spaniards sealed a 3-0 win with the penalty, leaving Napoli furious but confirming Milan's status as title contenders. 3 days later, Milan stumbled with a 1-0 defeat at Genoa that was quickly followed by a dominant 3-0 win over Udinese, highlighted by 2 clinical finishes from the resurgent Torres. Milan's victory over Udinese sparked an incredible run, winning 8 of their final 10 games of the year. Notably, Milan got revenge over Roma after last year's defeat cost them the Champions League qualification. Controversy struck again as Milan were awarded a questionable penalty. Replays show that Roma's defender Halabas seemingly won the ball before bringing down Schürrle. The German finished his penalty confidently, while Torres finished off the game with yet another goal. Despite the perceived luck against Napoli and Roma, Andolini's side silenced the doubters with a dominant 4-1 victory away against the title challengers Torino, reinforcing their status as genuine Scudetto contenders. In the Europa League, Milan easily topped their group with 16 points, securing a spot in the knockout round. By the end of the year, Milan topped the Serie A table with 41 points, 3 points clear of second-place Juventus. As the winter window opened, Milan saw a third striker option to rotate with Lacazette and Torres, with rumors linking them to a reunion with Mario Balotelli, who had requested a transfer at Liverpool. However, in a surprising move, Milan signed Yaya Toure on a loan from Arsenal, who had a poor record in North London. The move left fans furious, especially after Inter Milan swooped in and signed Balotelli for just £12 million. Andolini defended the move, citing financial reasons, with the Italian manager looking to sign a bigger name in the summer. Still, the move was met with plenty of criticism, as fans were worried that it could derail their season. The Rossoneri would endure an inconsistent January, winning 3 games, drawing 1, and losing 2. Following a disappointing round of 16 exit in the Coppa Italia, Sanogo made his full debut against Lazio and nearly scored, hitting the post before a lucky deflection allowed Lacazette to secure a 1-0 win. Despite their shaky form, Milan stayed level on points with Juventus, keeping the title race wide open heading into the season's decisive half. Milan would stay in the title race with a 2-0 victory over Udinese. This victory sparked a sensational run, with Milan taking 22 out of 24 possible points, going an incredible 9 straight league matches without conceding. This fantastic run extended their lead to 4 at the top of the table after 30 games. Fernando Torres led the charge in the attack, netting 9 goals during this stretch, with a standout display in a crucial 2-0 win over Roma, where he bagged a brace including a stunning chip. Meanwhile, in the Europa League, a dramatic last-minute header from Yaya Sanogo, one of his only 2 goals for Milan, saw the Rossoneri go through against CSKA Moscow. Next, Milan defeated Olympiacos 4-2 on aggregate and faced Malaga in the quarterfinals. After 2 grueling 0-0 draws, Milan won 4-3 on penalties. However, the drawn-out tie left them fatigued, as Lacazette suffered a hamstring injury in a 1-1 draw against Napoli. The draw ended Milan's winning streak, as their title charge had begun to slow down. As the season's final stretch approached, doubts grew for Milan as the team appeared to be running on fumes, with fans worried about another late-season collapse. Despite the challenges, Milan dug deep to grind out 3 crucial victories. Before crucial league matches against Inter and Juventus, they had to navigate a semi-final clash with Tottenham, where they would face a familiar face in the former player, Jeremy Menez. The first leg saw Roberto Soldado strike to give Spurs a 1-0 lead heading back to White Hart Lane for a dramatic second leg.
Milan travelled to North London, trailing by a single goal in their quest to reach the Europa League final. With Lacazette sidelined through injury, Andolini adjusted his approach, reverting to a 4-3-3 instead of pairing Torres with Sanogo. Bonaventura and Poli flanked Song in midfield as Milan aimed to control possession against a disciplined Spurs side. Their hopes took an early blow when El Shaarawy was forced off with an injury, an absence that would loom large with the derby against Inter just days away. But just before halftime, Milan found a lifeline. Fernando Torres, rolling back the years, skipped past the Spurs defence and rounded the keeper to level the tie on aggregate. A lapse in concentration allowed Roberto Soldado to pounce, restoring Tottenham's advantage. Milan pushed desperately for another goal, but their legs were heavy, their energy drained. Then, in stoppage time, a familiar face delivered the final blow. Former Milan man Jérémy Menet struck to make it 3-1 on aggregate, ending Milan's European dream.
Following the Europa League exit, some blamed Milan's fatigue, while others blamed Andolini for not re-signing Balotelli and leaving them reliant on an ineffective Sonogo. Still, with just 4 league matches remaining, Milan sat second and only 1 point behind Juventus, with a game in hand. To reclaim the top spot and gain control of the title race, Andolini's side knew they needed victory in the Milan derby. First, they had to contend with Mario Balotelli, who had scored 7 goals in 12 games since January. Many feared Milan's decision to pass on Balotelli would haunt them, but those concerns faded as Fernando Torres struck after 17 minutes. Inter quickly responded through Hernandez, casting doubt over Milan's title hopes. However, Salah's stunning solo run restored the lead almost immediately. Bonaventura followed up with another, sending Rossoneri into dreamland. Finally, a late goal from Alex Song sealed the commanding 4-1 derby victory, delivering a decisive statement in the Scudetto race. Back on top of the table, Milan held a narrow 2-point lead, heading into a potential title decider against Juventus.
Milan welcomed league leaders Juventus to the San Siro in a match billed as the title decider. With just 3 games remaining, the stakes couldn't be higher. The Rossoneri received a massive boost as Lacazette returned from injury, but the rest of the squad was still feeling the effects of a grueling schedule. The first half was a cagey affair, with neither side willing to blink first. With just 4 shots between them, it was clear that 1 goal could decide everything. After the break, Juventus turned up the pressure, searching for the breakthrough. Controversy struck when Carlos Tevez was brought down in the box after a clumsy collision with Descilio and Alex. But the referee waved play on, sparking fury from the visiting side. Milan responded with a counter-attack, giving Lacazette a clear sight at goal, but Buffon stood tall. Minutes later, Lacazette had another chance, but Buffon denied him yet again with a world-class save. It seemed impossible to beat the legendary Italian keeper. As full-time approached, the tension was unbearable. Juventus, desperate for a goal, threw everything forward, but their gamble backfired. A long clearance found Lacazette in open space. With defenders trailing behind, the Frenchman went on a stunning 60-yard solo run before finally beating Buffon with a clinical finish in the dying moments. The San Siro erupted. The often doubted striker had delivered when it mattered most. Andolini's faith in Lacazette had paid off in dramatic fashion. Milan secured a massive 1-0 victory, moving 5 points clear at the top with just 2 games left. The title was now within their grasp, as Andolini stood on the brink of restoring Milan to the pinnacle of Italian football.
Just 3 days later, Milan clinched their first Scudetto win in 6 years, with Fernando Torres scoring the decisive goal. Milan would lift the trophy after the final game against Sassuolo, where Torres capped off a brilliant season with a brace, scoring 28 goals in the league. Club captain Riccardo Montolivo hoisted the Scudetto as Milan celebrated their long-awaited return to the top of Italian football. In a grueling season where Juventus pushed them to the limit, Andolini ultimately proved he was the right man for the job. Since his appointment was announced, doubts surrounded his experience and tactical ability, but he silenced critics by guiding Milan to a club record 95 points. The 2015-16 season truly marked the pinnacle of Andolini's 2-year journey, as Milan finally returned to a new golden era. Though a Europa League semi-final exit stung, Andolini had firmly etched his name in Milan's history, proving he was the right man to restore the Rossoneri to the top. The league table finished with Milan at the top, 5 points ahead of Juventus, with both clubs far and away the top 2 teams in the league, while Genoa and Udinese had solid seasons, finishing 4th and 5th place. Milan dominated the end-of-season awards, with Torres claiming the Golden Boot and the MVP honors. Lacazette thrived in a deeper role, finishing as the league's top assist provider, while Diego Lopez set a record-breaking 24 clean sheets as Milan boasted the league's best defense, conceding just 18 goals all season. Unsurprisingly, Milan also dominated the team of the season, with 6 players including award winners Torres, Lacazette, and Diego Lopez, alongside Schürrle, Di Sciglio, and Poli. Juventus claimed 4 spots, with Quagliarella, the 3rd highest goal scorer in the league, also making the 11th. Meanwhile, Torres was named Milan's Player of the Season after an incredible 33-goal campaign that silenced doubters. Lacazette finally justified his price tag, forming a lethal partnership with Torres as Milan's 2nd highest scorer and assist provider. Last season's Player of the Season El Shaarawy had 22 goal contributions, again leading the team in assists, while Schürrle delivered another strong season with 16 goal contributions. Meanwhile, new signing Mo Salah had a solid campaign, with many expecting the Egyptian to take another step next season. The switch to a 2-striker formation saw Poli's attacking numbers dip, as the Italian was given more defensive responsibilities in a double pivot alongside Alex Song. The 2014-15 season marked a turning point for AC Milan. After years of mediocrity, the Rossoneri reclaimed the Scudetto and returned to the top of Italian football. What began as a managerial gamble has proven its weight in gold, as Andolini leads Milan into a new golden era. With young talents continuing to develop, one of Europe's most lethal attacking duos, and a rock-solid defense, Milan's resurgence is only just beginning. The next step for Andolini Milan is reclaiming their throne as kings of Europe, and finally bringing the Champions League trophy back to the San Siro. The appointment of Antonio Andolini in the summer of 2014 was met with plenty of scrutiny and doubt. His first season began with promise, but ended in a late-season collapse, with many claiming that the Italian was out of his depth. However, Andolini silenced any doubt and earned widespread respect inside Italy, after leading Milan to a historic club record 95-point Scudetto win in the 2015-16 season. Now, heading into the summer of 2016, with Milan back atop Italian football, Andolini's focus has shifted. The disappointment of the Europa League semi-final exit to Tottenham left him with a renewed desire to restore Milan's status as kings of Europe by conquering the Champions League. Yet, a seismic shift was looming that would alter the very core of the club. Longtime owner Silvio Berlusconi had been exploring a potential sale of the club for several years. The Italian media tycoon and 3-time Italian Prime Minister had owned Milan since 1986, overseeing multiple golden generations and guiding the club to countless domestic and European trophies. Milan's stock had never been higher after the historic Scudetto, and Berlusconi saw it as a perfect opportunity to step away from the team he had famously rescued from bankruptcy decades earlier. At the start of the summer, Milan officially confirmed a £740 million sale to the Rossoneri Sport Investment Lux, a group fronted by Chinese businessmen Yang Hao Li and Han Li. The deal had previously been delayed twice due to funding complications, but a loan allowed the group to meet its financial obligations. For the first time in 30 years, AC Milan was under new ownership. Young Hong Lee would act as a new face of the club's leadership, as he quickly confirmed that Antonio Andolini would remain as the manager. Lee promised significant transfer investment to keep Milan at the pinnacle of Italian football and return the club to European glory. This ambition would be the cornerstone of Milan's newest chapter, as the club embarked on a bold new era, one that promised glory, but would soon test the very foundations of the club and the heart of the city it calls home. The summer of 2016 was a new era for Milan. Back at the top of Italian football, the club now has an ambitious board determined to keep them there. More importantly, they have a manager in Andolini who is determined to re-establish Milan as a European powerhouse. New chairman Lee wasn't just offering vocal support, he backed it up by handing Andolini a new 3-year contract, keeping him at the club through the 2018-19 season. However, the manager was underwhelmed by the lack of significant pay rise in the new deal. Still, the promise of major investment in the squad helped ease those frustrations. Andolini believed if he delivered success on the European stage, the financial rewards would follow. For now, he was thrilled by the ownership's ambition and commitment to the squad improvement, as he had plenty of work to do to compete in the Champions League. The primary area Andolini aimed to strengthen was Milan's lack of quality squad depth, which had hampered them in his first 2 seasons. Andolini was convinced that if Milan had any real ambition to compete on multiple fronts, they needed a deeper squad capable of handling the demands of a long season. He first moved to clear out the deadwood and free up space for new arrivals. Adel Rami was the first to depart, joining Aston Villa for £5 million, while Kazuki Honda followed him to the Premier League, signing for Everton for £10 million. Meanwhile, little-used players like Didac Chavilla, Suso, and Alex were all shipped off to Sevilla for a combined £11 million. The final departure saw Niang join Udinese for £4.9 million. The first signing of the summer was free agent Pepe, the former Real Madrid centre-back, was expected to replace Alex and provide leadership and experience at the back. To further bolster depth at centre-back, Slobodan Rajkovic was signed from Hamburg for £7 million. A more high-profile addition followed as Kyle Walker arrived from Tottenham for £15.5 million. The English right-back was viewed as a long-term successor to Ignacio Abate, with the vice-captain beginning to show signs of slowing down as age caught up with him. In attack, Portuguese winger Nani joined from Manchester United for £11 million, brought in to provide both cover and competition on the flanks. Yet the most pressing issue was Milan's lack of depth at striker, with Fernando Torres and Alexander Lacazette the only options up front. Supporters were expecting a major signing after Andolini had famously passed on bringing back Mario Balotelli in the previous January transfer window, opting instead for a short-term signing in Yaya Sanogo. This time, however, Andolini delivered. Reports linking Milan to Ciro Immobile quickly gathered steam, as the Italian forward was pushing for a move away from Borussia Dortmund. Milan sealed the deal and got their man for a hefty £25.5 million. And finally, fans were thrilled as club legend Kaká made an emotional return from the MLS side Orlando City for £1.5 million. Persuaded by Andolini to return for one final run, the Brazilian was expected to provide veteran leadership as he aimed to help Milan end his storied career on a high. With a busy transfer window wrapped up, Andolini was content with the squad, confident they could make a serious push in the Champions League. More importantly, he was encouraged by the backing he received from Milan's new ownership. The club ended the summer with a net transfer spend of negative £29.6 million, having invested heavily in the squad and far outspent their sales income, a clear sign of ambition from the top. Tactically, Andolini made a notable shift from the 4-4-1-1 system that had helped Milan break their points record in the previous season. With the new defensive signings, the Italian began experimenting with various three-at-the-back formations, settling on an experimental 3-6-1 system. The season officially got underway with another Supercoppa clash between Milan and Juventus. Just like the previous season, Milan ran out winners in a statement win. Torres and Lacazette continued their strong form from the previous season, demonstrating why they were considered one of the deadliest striking duos in Europe. Yet Juventus fought back to bring the game back to 2-2 before vice-captain Abate scored a 90th minute winner to hand Milan the victory, as Andolini's side opened the season with a trophy, hopefully a good omen for the upcoming season. However, Milan got off to a middling start to the league campaign, going 5-3-0 in the first 8 matches. A dull 0-0 draw at home against Palermo, followed by another frustrating stalemate against Lazio, where Nani squandered a golden chance for a last-minute winner, left Andolini concerned about his team's goal-scoring threat. Those concerns were seemingly quelled after a 1-0 win over Napoli as Torres rediscovered his goal-scoring form. Unfortunately, a training injury left the Spaniard on the sidelines for 8 weeks with a torn calf. Thankfully, the board's investment meant Andolini had Immobile waiting in the wings to replace Torres. Milan would need the Italian as they found themselves in third, 3 points behind surprising league leaders Fiorentina, and just 1 point ahead of their rivals Inter Milan. Meanwhile, Milan finally returned to the Champions League, ironically facing Atletico Madrid, the same opponent from their last appearance in the competition. The Spanish side had embarrassed the Rossoneri in the 2014 round of 16, eliminating them 5-1 in aggregate. This time, however, Andolini was determined to prove that this was the new Milan, ready to challenge Europe's elite. He got his wish after a clumsy Atletico challenge gifted Milan an early penalty and the opening goal, as the Rossoneri never looked back. In a statement win that was heard across Europe, Milan cruised to a 3-0 victory, with club legend Kaká stealing the headlines. The Brazilian who scored Milan's lone goal in the 2014 defeat came off the bench to net twice, reintroducing Milan to the European stage, and it would be an emphatic return as Milan ran through their group as they comfortably finished top of the group, where they progressed to the round of 16 to face Paris Saint-Germain. Back in the league, Milan faced a crucial early season run of fixtures against their main Scudetto rivals, Juventus, Inter, and Fiorentina. First up was a trip to Turin, where Milan looked to ignite their title defense with a statement performance. Just as they had in the Supercoppa, Milan dismantled Juventus. Lacazette opened the scoring with a brilliant solo goal, and a flowing team move ended with Matteo De Sciglio, who was deployed in the midfield within Andolini's 3-6-1 system, beating David De Gea to make it 2-0. Kaká rounded off the performance with a late goal, sealing an impressive 3-1 victory. The momentum carried into the Milan derby, where Andolini doubled down on the 3-6-1 system that had sparked a turn to form. With Torres sidelined, Immobile finally stepped up to the occasion, scoring within just 4 minutes. Goals from Salah and Nani wrapped up a dominant 3-0 win over Inter, with the Rossoneri outclassing their neighbors. The back-to-back wins kept Milan just 1 point behind league leaders Fiorentina, while Juventus and Inter began to falter. With the table tightening, the title race was quickly becoming a two-horse race between Andolini's Milan and an informed Fiorentina. And finally, the top two sides met under the floodlights in Florence, with just a single point separating them. It was a perfect opportunity for Milan to seize control of the title race. But the host struck first. Only 10 minutes in, Josip Ilicic stunned the visitors with an early goal, catching Milan cold and sending a clear message that Fiorentina were no pretenders. They were genuine Scudetto contenders. However, Milan responded with a well-worked move that saw Andrea Poli slot the ball past the keeper to level the match at 1-1. The comeback was completed through Nani, who showcased brilliant footwork in the box before coolly finishing to give Milan the lead. The Portuguese winger had been criticized earlier in the season for his miss against Lazio, but his form had now picked up, with him becoming a crucial part of the attack. Milan looked to have sealed the match when De Sciglio popped up with yet another goal to make it 3-1. The fullback was thriving in his new midfield role as Milan rolled through Fiorentina. But with 10 minutes ago, a rash challenge from Abate handed Fiorentina a penalty and a chance to claw back into the game. Up stepped Hulk, but his strike rattled the crossbar and stayed out. Fiorentina missed their opportunity to get back into the game as Milan held firm to secure a crucial 3-1 victory. Despite the statement win in Florence, Milan stumbled to the end of the calendar year, managing just 5 points from the final 4 league matches. Still, the Rossoneri reached the halfway point of the season, clinging on to the top spot on goal difference, with Milan breathing down their necks. Unfortunately for Fiorentina, Milan enjoyed an almost perfect January, collecting 13 points from a possible 15. Their strong run of form was sparked by the return of Torres, who had been sidelined for 2 months with injury. Milan's form gave them breathing room at the top of the table, pulling 3 points clear of Fiorentina and Roma, the latter of whom was finding their form after a slow start. Milan would soon meet Roma at home in a pivotal clash in the title race. But first, Andolini went to the new ownership and requested additional funds to strengthen the midfield, which were granted. The influx of cash saw Yaya Toure signed for £26 million from Manchester City. The aging star had been cast aside by new City boss Pep Guardiola, and Andolini thought he was a perfect fit for the midfield. With the transfer window completed, the winter transfer window slammed shut, and Milan welcomed Roma to the San Siro. Toure would get his debut, starting at the base of Andolini's experimental diamond midfield and his 3-6-1 system. Andolini believed his athleticism and technique would provide a more dynamic lone pivot than Alex Song could. Unfortunately, just half an hour into the match, Toure went down with an injury after jumping for a header, seemingly rolling his ankle on the way down. It was a disastrous start for the new signing, leaving Andolini concerned about the severity of the setback. Fortunately, a moment of brilliance from Salah quickly eased those concerns, as Poli pounced on the rebound from the Egyptian shot to open the scoring. Later, a cleverly executed set-piece routine saw Vertonghen double Milan's lead. The match ended 2-0, with Milan once again dispatching title challengers in commanding fashion. Unfortunately, Yaya Toure's injury proved to be serious, with the Ivorian suffering a broken ankle that would sideline him for 3 months. Andolini faced considerable criticism from both within the club and from the media, with many questioning the heavy spending on what seemed to be an unnecessary addition. Yet Andolini dismissed those concerns, pointing out the board had approved the transfer, and they were comfortable with the finances involved, as he saw no reason to second-guess the move. Still, Milan were preparing themselves for a crucial clash against PSG in the Champions League round of 16, with Andolini determined to show that Milan were genuine contenders. The first leg saw Milan travel to Paris, where they were greeted by two familiar faces in the former stars Thiago Silva and Zlatan Ibrahimovic, the latter of whom Andolini had previously tried and failed to bring back to the club. Milan's European ambitions took an early blow just 17 minutes in, as PSG carved through the backline with ease, as Lavezzi finished past Diego Lopez to give the hosts a lead. Things quickly went from bad to worse when Kyle Walker mistimed a challenge in the box and conceded a penalty, handing PSG a chance to double their advantage. Up stepped former Milan talisman Ibrahimovic with a chance to sink the club he had once led, but Lopez came up with a crucial save to deny the Swede, keeping Milan's hopes alive. Just a couple minutes later, Milan would win their own penalty thanks to a rash tackle from Verratti. Unlike Zlatan, Andre Schürrle made no mistake from the spot, burying his penalty to level the score, the most important goal of his Milan career so far. Just moments later, a brilliant save from Sirigu denied Matteo De Sciglio from putting the visitors ahead. The PSG keeper came to the rescue again shortly after, saving another Milan effort and keeping the score level. Those missed chances would come back to haunt the Rossoneri, with Zlatan playing through Lucas Moura, who finished to restore the French side's lead. The match ended 2-1, leaving Milan with plenty to do in the second leg. Back at the San Siro, Milan needed to overturn the 2-1 aggregate deficit to progress. Unfortunately, their away goal was almost immediately cancelled out after a brilliant piece of play saw Johan Cabaye stun the hosts, widening Milan's deficit even further. Thankfully for Andolini, a solo goal from Lacazette put Milan right back into the tie, making it 3-2 on aggregate. Then another solo effort, this time from Ciro Immobile, leveled the aggregate score, with Andolini's summer recruitments paying off big time. As things stood, Milan had overturned the first leg deficit and the match was heading towards extra time. The night would be defined by solo goals. Vice-captain Abate worked his way into the box and beat Sirigu for the third time, finally giving Milan the lead. He just managed to squeeze the shot past the keeper, who nearly saved it with his foot. The match ended with Milan progressing 4-3 in aggregate, as Andolini proved that his side could compete with an elite European opponent. Milan would match up against Borussia Dortmund in the quarterfinals, the German side having just knocked out neighbors Inter Milan 3-0 in aggregate. The first leg saw Milan leave the San Siro with a 1-0 lead after Alex Song, the most unlikely of heroes, scored a brilliant goal. Milan headed into the Signal Iduna Park with Andolini planning a tactical shift for the Champions League. While the 3-6-1 was effective in the Serie A, it had proven too unstable defensively for the intensity of knockout football. As a result, the Italian manager switched to a counter-attacking 5-3-2 system. The switch couldn't have gone any better for Andolini, as Milan ran out 5-1 victors. Dortmund simply couldn't cope with Milan's devastating counterattack, as the Rossoneri ruthlessly carved open the defense time after time. At the other end, Dortmund struggled to break through Milan's organized back line, resulting in a frustrating night for the hosts. It seemed Andolini had found the perfect system to conquer Europe with, as Milan would match up with Manchester City in the semi-finals. Back in the league, Milan had worked their way back to the top of the table with 6 games left to go, thanks to a record of 6-2-2 since a 2-0 win against Roma at the start of February. The losses came in the form of a shock defeat away to Cagliari and a disappointing 2-1 home loss to Napoli, as Milan appeared to be unfocused after their 5-1 victory over Dortmund. Nevertheless, the striker partnership of Torres and Lacazette reignited, with the duo once again spearheading Milan's title charge. Torres had had a difficult campaign following his early season injury, but the Spaniard was regaining his form, reminding fans why the Torres-Lacazette duo was considered one of the best in Europe last season. Meanwhile, Immobile continued to deliver crucial goals off the bench, providing exactly what Andolini needed in a backup striker. So much so that the Italian was beginning to push Torres for the starting spot. However, concerns in the attack resurfaced after a frustrating 0-0 draw away to Sampdoria, in which Milan were denied by one of the greatest goalkeeping performances in recent memory. The Rossoneri registered 12 shots on target, but were repeatedly thwarted by Vincenzo Ferrillo, who deservedly earned the Man of the Match award. To make matters worse, Alex Song suffered a sprained knee while contesting a header, ruling him out for several weeks. With both primary defensive midfielders now sidelined and young Vertonghen also out after breaking his ankle in training, Andolini was left with serious gaps in his squad at a critical stage of the season. Milan entered their Champions League semi-final clash with defensive injuries piling up, but with a spot in the final at stake, Andolini made a bold decision to rush Yaya Toure back to the bench for a dramatic return to his former home, the Etihad Stadium. Just 2 matches separated Milan from a return to the biggest stage in club football. Andolini stuck with the 5-3-2 formation, deploying Matteo Di Sceglio as a defensive midfielder, with Alex Song unavailable and Torre not fit to start. Just 5 minutes in, Milan's counterattack sliced through Manchester City's defense. Torres laid it on a plate for Lacazette, but the Frenchman was denied by a brilliant save. Moments later, another point-blank stop from Joe Hart kept Man City alive. But Milan would not be denied forever. Lacazette finally found the breakthrough, putting the Rossoneri 1-0 up with a vital away goal. As the hour mark approached, Yaya Toure made his Milan return, and his return to the Etihad, to respectful applause from Manchester City fans. With just seconds left in the game, Kyle Walker set up Di Sceglio for a crucial second away goal. The Italian fullback had been excelling in his new midfielder role, scoring important goals, and none more vital than this one, as Milan now had one foot in the final. The return leg at the San Siro saw Milan book their place in the final, with Lacazette's 8th-minute goal securing a 2-1 victory for the Rossoneri. It was a historic moment for Milan, a club once synonymous with the Champions League. This marked their first final since 2007 and offered Andolini a chance to firmly establish himself as one of the top managers in Europe. Milan would face a familiar face in the final in the form of Juventus. In fact, they were gearing up for 3 crucial clashes against the Old Lady. First, they were set to meet in the third-to-last league game at home against Juventus, with Milan set to clinch the title. Meanwhile, they were set to face off in the Coppa Italia final, after Milan had ran through Lazio and Roma to reach the final, setting up a potential treble. Finally, the Champions League final was their third and final clash at the end of the season. If Milan wanted the treble, they were going to have to go through Juventus. The side that Andolini had fought for years to the throne was now the fitting final hurdle between him and football immortality. The first clash between the two sides was a cagey affair, with both teams feeling each other out ahead of the upcoming finals. Unfortunately for Milan, an injury to Salah meant the Egyptian would miss the next few games, weakening the side's attacking threat. Then, in the 90th minute, a brilliant ball from Schürrle put Lacazette through on goal, and the Frenchman scored a dramatic last-minute winner to give Milan some breathing room at the top of the table. Yet Milan's lead at the top of the table shrank to just 1 point, heading into a title-deciding final day against second-place Fiorentina. Balotelli's late goal in the Milan derby saw the game end 1-1, while another dramatic late goal saw a heavily rotated Milan side face a shock defeat against 16th-place Verona. Milan had the chance to clinch a title before the final day and focus on the upcoming finals. Instead, now they needed a result on the last day to win the Scudetto. Milan welcomed Fiorentina to the San Siro for the most important Serie A match of the season. A win-or-draw would see the Rossoneri retain their crown, while only a victory would deliver Fiorentina their first Scudetto win since 1969. For Milan and Andolini, it was the first step towards a historic treble. For Fiorentina, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Milan's title defense got off to a perfect start, with Di Sceglio scoring yet another crucial goal. The fullback was having a phenomenal season and put Milan up 1-0. Fiorentina weren't going down without a fight, however, as the visitors immediately struck back to make it 1-1. Yet Fiorentina's hopes of a comeback were quickly dashed, as Lacazette scored a simple tap-in for his 11th goal of the season. Finally, their title dreams were officially crushed when Di Sceglio scored yet another goal, thanks to a deflection off German defender Taschi. Milan had done it. They had successfully retained the Serie A title, with 1/3 of the treble completed. This time they lifted the trophy in front of their home crowd, with club legend Kaká giving the honors of hoisting the Scudetto into the air. However, Andolini's side was well aware that the job wasn't complete yet. Juventus were awaiting them in the Coppa Italia and Champions League finals. Coming just days after the final league match, Milan's legs were heavy, punished by their failure to wrap up the league title earlier, with key players like Torres starting on the bench. Meanwhile, Vertonghen finally returned to give Milan a boost ahead of the final. Juventus came out aggressively, overwhelming the tired Milan side and threatening to put the Rossoneri away early. Thankfully for Andolini, Milan's defense held firm to enter halftime at 0-0, with Diego Lopez recording 5 saves in the first half, along with a crucial piece of defending from Kyle Walker, who denied Morata the opening goal. Just minutes into the second half, disaster struck as Yaya Toure went down with an almost identical injury to the one he suffered earlier in the season. The Ivorian couldn't continue, and Milan were falling apart, barely keeping Juventus at bay, when Morata finally beat Lopez to hand Juventus the lead in the final. Milan were on the ropes and needed a solution fast. Thankfully, a moment of brilliance from El Shaarawy put them right back into the game. It came against a run of play, with Juve growing visibly frustrated by their earlier misses. Their frustration over the missed chances would ultimately come back to haunt them, as Fernando Torres, who was brought on late, scored a winning goal in the 82nd minute with his very first shot of the game. Milan were now two-thirds of the way to the historic treble, celebrating the Coppa Italia triumph. It was beginning to look like a statement to the rest of Italy that Milan were entering a new golden era, one which they intended to stay on top of Italian football for a long time. And finally, it was time for the Champions League final, and the third matchup between the two sides. It'd be an all-Italian affair, fittingly held on home soil at the Stadio Olimpico in Rome. For Milan, they had scraped through against PSG after a dramatic comeback, then proceeded to dismantle Dortmund and brush aside Manchester City on their road to the final. Meanwhile, Juventus' road to Rome saw them edge past Valencia, Real Madrid, and Bayern Munich, all by just a single goal. Both sides head into the final with a week's rest, with Milan boosted by the return of Mo Salah from injury. For Milan, it was a chance at a historic treble and a long-awaited return to the throne as kings of Europe. It was a predictably rough affair, with the two rivals set to battle out yet again. Salah nearly marked his return with a dream goal, but his team effort was easily saved by Buffon. Juventus, however, would strike first, capitalizing on a lapse in concentration from Abate, who lost track of Tevez at the back post. Just like in the Coppa Italia final, Milan found themselves trailing early, forced once again to chase the game. Milan were struggling to find a way back into the game, with their hopes of a treble and a European crown slipping through their fingers. Then a familiar hero emerged. Substitute Nani set up Deschiglio, who once again scored a crucial goal for Milan to put the Rossoneri back into the game. The Italian was arguably Milan's player of the season, and without a doubt it was the most important goal of his career. Then in the dying moments of the game, a counterattack saw Lacazette play through Nani, who was left one-on-one with Bonucci. The Portuguese winger created just enough space to slot the ball past Buffon and finally give Milan the lead. It was too little too late for Juventus, as a full-time whistle blew and Milan were crowned European champions. Juventus were devastated after losing to Milan 3 times in a row. Meanwhile, Andolini had finally returned Milan to the absolute pinnacle of not just Italian football, but European football. Milan were once again kings of Europe, as Abate lifted the trophy into the air and confetti rained down from the sky. Andolini was now considered one of the top managers in all of Europe after achieving the historic treble. Milan became just the second Italian side ever to complete a treble, following city rivals Inter Milan's 2010 triumph under Jose Mourinho. To be mentioned in the same breath as Mourinho was a feat not lost on the Italian manager. Once an unknown figure coaching amateur sides in the small hometown of Corleone, Andolini had come a long way. After being doubted in his first season and earning the respect of his country in the second, his third season saw him etch his name into a pantheon of all-time greats, ensuring he would never be a forgotten manager ever again. As for Milan's end-of-season awards, Deschiglio was deservedly named the player of the season. The fullback was thrust into an unfamiliar role this year and exceeded all expectations, registering 8 goals and 6 assists in 42 appearances. He was an integral part of the squad and consistently stepped up in some of the campaign's most crucial moments. Lacazette was a close contender, finishing with 19 goals and 8 assists, his most productive season to date. He was a key figure throughout the year, as was Torres, who despite his dip in form due to injuries, still ended the season as the team's top provider. Meanwhile, Schürrle, Immobile, and El Shaarawy all played significant roles in Milan's dynamic attack, each contributing to key matches across the campaign. In the league, Milan's successful title defense saw them finish with 84 points. Fiorentina enjoyed their best season in decades, but ultimately couldn't overcome Andolini's treble-winning side. Meanwhile, Roma narrowly edged out Napoli and Inter for their final Champions League spot, and Juventus endured a disastrous campaign, finishing 6th place and 19 points off the top, and suffering heartbreak in 2 separate finals at the hands of Milan. Surprisingly, Roma's Doumbia was named the league's most valuable player after winning the Golden Boot with 22 goals. Fiorentina's impressive second-place finish was fueled by the league's top assist provider, Borja Valero, while Diego Lopez claimed the Golden Glove for the 2nd season in a row with 16 clean sheets. Unsurprisingly, Milan's defense was heavily represented in the team of the season, with Lopez, Deschiglia, and Vertonghen all earning honors, and Lacazette also featured up top alongside Doumbia and Tevez. Heading into the 2017-18 season, and fresh off delivering a historic treble, Andolini requested a new and improved contract to reflect the success he had brought the club. The board agreed and negotiations were officially opened to reward the Italian manager for his success at the club. At the same time, the summer transfer window opened, with Andolini eager to further strengthen an already incredible squad. His top priority was to properly address a defensive midfielder position. Alex Song had been solid but unspectacular, while Yaya Toure was increasingly looking like a poor signing. The Italian manager was facing growing criticism over the move, as the Ivorian had managed just 9 appearances due to 2 significant injuries. To solve the issue, Andolini signed Italian international Marco Verratti for a club record £42.5 million. It was a staggering amount, but Andolini believed Verratti was a perfect fit to serve as a deep-lying playmaker at the heart of Milan's midfield. Meanwhile, the manager was forced to deal with an unexpected transfer request from his number 9, Fernando Torres. El Niño had begun to feel homesick and expressed his desire to return to his boyhood club, Atletico Madrid, to finish off his career. Though disappointed, Andolini ultimately respected the striker's wishes. After all, Torres had scored 47 goals across 2 seasons and played a crucial role in delivering Milan multiple trophies. With Torres returning to Madrid, Andolini knew he needed a replacement. While Lacazette and Immobile had enjoyed strong seasons, relying solely on the pair up front wouldn't be good enough going forward. In turn, Andolini once again targeted Zlatan Ibrahimovic to strengthen the front line and finally bring him back to Milan. This time, the deal appeared to be nearing completion, with the Swedish forward eager to return to the club. Meanwhile, negotiations on Andolini's own contract extension were progressing well, but then, suddenly, reports began to surface that the deal with Zlatan had collapsed. Andolini was caught off guard. These were legitimate outlets reporting the news, yet he had received no official word that the transfer had fallen through. Confused, he was soon summoned to an urgent meeting with the club chairman Lee. There, he was informed that due to financial concerns, the club had been forced to pull out of the deal, as well as postpone its contract renewal until the end of the season. Andolini was outraged. Not only had the club sanctioned his large spending over the last few years, but they also had promised to renew his contract. Andolini felt that given his success, he deserved both a new contract and full transparency regarding the club's financial issues. However, Lee reiterated that the club needed to cut back on expenses to ensure its long-term stability, despite just authorizing a club record transfer. Andolini left the meeting even more confused than ever, and now frustrated by the broken promises. Yet his immediate concern remained on the need to replace Torres. The board acknowledged this, but insisted that any new transfers be cheap alternatives. Reluctantly, Andolini found himself scrambling before the start of the season, eventually signing Fabio Borini for a low transfer fee of $5.8 million. Andolini wanted a starting caliber forward, but was left with nothing but a backup. To make matters worse, Lee refused to sanction any further deals. No loans, no free transfers, nothing. The chairman made it clear that there would be no more spending, telling Andolini to find solutions within the club. So Andolini was forced to turn to the academy to strengthen the squad further. There he identified 2 brilliant prospects who looked ready to contribute to the first team. The first was a 5'5" Argentine center midfielder named Dario Verdejo. Though lacking physicality, Andolini saw potential as a future world-class playmaker in him. His ball control and visions were well beyond his years. Then there was Stanislas Karides, a Greek winger with great technical and finishing ability. Both players were far from the finished article and would undoubtedly struggle with the physical demands of top-level football. But with financial restrictions tightening around him, Andolini had little choice but to place his faith in the next generation. The season opened up with yet another match between Juventus in the Supercoppa final. In what was a familiar script between the two teams, Juventus struck first before Lacazette equalized for Milan, bringing the match to a tense stalemate. This time, however, Andolini introduced some fresh blood into the fixture, handing a debut to Greek wonderkid Stanislas Karides. The youngster made an immediate impact, announcing himself to the world with an audacious chip over David De Gea that rattled in off the bar to give Milan the lead. Yet Karides wasn't done. He followed up with a second goal to seal the victory and cap off a dream debut. Milan lifted yet another trophy, and the season began with his statement. Before the league season kicked off, Milan faced the Europa League winner Sevilla in the UEFA Super Cup. Sevilla took a shock early lead, giving Milan a serious sense of déjà vu. Just like in last season's match against Sampdoria, the Rossoneri ran into a goalkeeping masterclass, this time from Sevilla's Fernando Muslera. Milan registered 15 shots on target over the course of the match, but the Uruguayan keeper denied them time after time. As the 90th minute approached, with Milan still unable to find a breakthrough, Andolini began to worry that the loss of Fernando Torres was already taking the toll on the team's attacking output. Thankfully, Lacazette was on hand to rescue Milan, slotting home a well-placed finish to finally beat Muslera and send the game to extra time. Then, just as the match seemed destined for penalties, young prospect Dario Verdejo slipped a perfectly weighted pass through to Lacazette, who once again beat the Sevilla goalkeeper to clinch the win for Milan. It was a dramatic victory and a perfect start to the season. With 2 trophies already secured, Milan looked poised to build on their historic treble-winning campaign. And most encouragingly for Andolini, the youth prospects appeared to be more than ready to step up and make an impact at the highest level. Andolini's faith in his youngsters continued to be rewarded, as Chronicles scored in his Serie A debut during the Milan derby, helping the team cruise to a comfortable 3-1 victory on opening day. The Greek wonderkid continued to impress, quickly adapting to life in Serie A and netting 2 more goals in a thrilling 4-2 win over Juventus. It seemed Andolini had a serious talent on his hands. Unfortunately, a rough tackle saw the youngster go down clutching his knee, with many fearing a serious injury. Initial concerns pointed at a potential ACL tear, but an MRI later confirmed that there was no ligament damage. Instead, Chronicles had suffered a hyperextended knee, which would sideline him for about a month. Chronicles' injury proved to be a bad omen for Andolini's side, as the Rossoneri endured a turbulent first half to the league campaign, finishing with a record of 11-6-2 and sitting in 3rd place at the midway point of the season. They suffered disappointing defeats away to Fiorentina and a 2-1 loss at home to Roma, and were plagued by a growing injury crisis. It began with Nani and Schürrle picking up long-term injuries in training, and it quickly escalated with 5 first-team players sidelined for extended periods. At one point, it seemed like whenever one player returned, another was immediately sidelined. Although Milan remained in a decent position, the mounting injuries were threatening to derail any hopes of a Serie A three-peat. The injury crisis saw Milan collect just 14 points from a possible 27 across January and February. The poor run included another defeat to Roma, allowing them to complete the double over Milan for the first time since Andolini's debut season. Fortunately for Andolini, the injury crisis showed no signs of easing. A virtually new set of 5 players were sidelined throughout the 2 months, continuing the cycle of setbacks. Milan's season was beginning to be defined by injuries. After 25 games, they remained stuck in 3rd place, still just 4 points off top. To reclaim the Scudetto, Milan would need a near-perfect run to the end of the season. But with key players still unavailable and Andolini focused on defending the Champions League title, the task ahead seemed almost impossible. Speaking of the Champions League, the injury crisis saw Milan finish 2nd in their group behind Tottenham. While Milan comfortably ran through Ajax and St. Etienne, 2 losses to Tottenham condemned them to the runner-up spot. As a result, Milan were handed a tough round of 16 draw against Premier League champions Chelsea. The stumble in the group stage saw Andolini facing one of the most formidable defenses in Europe, a team that would go on to reclaim the Premier League title by the season's end. Milan went into the clash against Chelsea with a heavily depleted back line. With both Pepe and Vertonghen out injured, Kyle Walker was forced to shift to center back, while aging Abate was brought into the starting lineup. The Italian fullback saw his game time significantly decrease this season, and was now starting in the most important match of the campaign. Milan nearly got off to a perfect start, with Yaya Toure launching a quick counterattack that ended with Lacazette squandering a golden opportunity to take the lead. The match remained evenly contested, with Diego Costa coming close to scoring twice in the first half. Eventually, Chelsea broke the deadlock. A back post cross eventually found Willian, who tapped in to give their visitors a crucial away goal. A brilliant moment from Oscar caught Lopez completely off guard, leaving the keeper helpless to stop it. Then in the 90th minute, Mo Salah went on an incredible solo run, beating multiple Chelsea defenders before scoring against his former club to equalize at the death. Salah carried his form into the second leg, as another solo run saw the Egyptian score once again against his former side. However, a curling effort from Diego Costa leveled the aggregate score, leaving everything to play for. Then, just like in the first leg, a counterattack sparked by Verratti led to Lacazette scoring and giving Milan the lead on aggregate, and 1 foot in the quarterfinals. More importantly, the second away goal ensured that Chelsea's late equalizer wasn't enough, as Milan advanced on away goals with a 3-3 aggregate score. Milan faced Wolfsburg in the quarterfinals, and the German side suffered the same fate as their compatriots Dortmund had in the previous season. The Rossoneri cruised to a 4-1 aggregate victory, with El Shaarawy scoring twice, and Verratti adding another as the Italian continued his strong campaign. In the semi-final, a blockbuster showdown awaited, as Milan were set to face off against Real Madrid. The two most decorated clubs in European history would go head-to-head for a chance to add yet another Champions League title to their illustrious trophy cabinets. In the meantime, Andolini had to refocus his squad on the league as they entered a final stretch of the campaign. 4 wins in March were enough to keep Milan in the title race, with the Rossoneri still 4 points behind Juventus. However, a match against Lazio triggered a disastrous turn of events. A catastrophic own goal from Lopez set the tone, followed by a contested aerial challenge that saw Vertonghen injure his knee, sidelining the Belgian international for a month. Then came controversy as Milan were denied a penalty after a clash in the box while Immobile attempted a shot. The match ended 1-1 and marked the beginning of the end of the title run, as Milan failed to win any of their next 3 matches. Defeats to mid-table Sampdoria, title rivals Napoli, and an embarrassing 1-0 loss to 17th place Pescara saw Milan officially drop out of the title race. Now 10 points off first place, the focus had shifted from chasing the Scudetto to simply securing Champions League qualification. Yet, despite an underwhelming domestic season, Milan were still within reach of reclaiming the Champions League title. Standing in their way, however, was one of the most star-studded teams in Europe, featuring Sergio Aguero up top, flanked by Gareth Bale and Cristiano Ronaldo. If Milan hoped to retain their crown, they would need to leave the Bernabeu with a result. They nearly got off to a perfect start after a trademark Milan counterattack saw Mo Salah come close to putting the visitors ahead just 16 minutes into the game. Moments later, Salah nearly turned provider with a brilliant chip that set up Lacazette, but the Frenchman squandered the opportunity. The missed chances would come back to haunt Milan, as Cristiano Ronaldo put the hosts ahead with a clinical finish. Perhaps the best player in the world was showing Milan exactly how not to waste opportunities. The game remained finely balanced, with both sides registering 5 shots apiece halfway through the match, as Europe's 2 most storied clubs battled out for a place in the final. Then a reckless challenge by Toni Kroos handed Milan a golden opportunity to level the score. Lacazette stepped up and calmly converted the penalty, securing a vital away goal at the Santiago Bernabeu. Then, in the dying moments, Poli played Lacazette through with a chance to win it at the death, but he missed. Yet another wasted opportunity saw a crucial away victory slip through Milan's fingers. They left the Bernabeu with an important away goal, but they knew they had squandered a major opportunity to leave with more. Milan entered the second leg with a sense of uneasiness, as fans nervously hoped the team could hold on to their slim away goal advantage. But after just 4 minutes, those fears were realized as Sergio Aguero blasted a shot off the crossbar, immediately wiping out Milan's first leg result. Things only got worse from there, as Ciro Immobile was forced off early due to an injury. Yet another blow in a season riddled with injuries. The depleted Milan side barely put up a fight, as Aguero eventually sealed a 2-0 victory for Real Madrid. Milan were sent crashing out of the Champions League. Their hopes of reclaiming the European crown were now dead and buried. Despite the setbacks, a determined Milan managed to finish the league campaign with 9 points from a possible 12, with the only loss coming in the final day against Inter. This solid run was enough to secure the Champions League qualification spot, well below the season's original expectations, but still a crucial achievement for the club. However, there was still a consolation prize for Milan. They found themselves in the Coppa Italia final and once again facing Juventus. The route to the final had been relatively smooth, with a 2-0 win over rivals Inter being the only challenging match along the way. It was an opportunity for Milan to salvage some pride and end a difficult season on a high note. Andolini's men entered the final focused and determined to end the season with silverware. Yaya Toure captained the side, having enjoyed a bounce-back year with a clean bill of health. Meanwhile, Andolini gave starts to both Verdejo and Curides, offering a glimpse into Milan's future. Milan got off to a blistering start, with Kyle Walker setting up Lacazette for the opening goal. Just moments later, the captain for the day, Yaya Toure, made it 2-0 to give Milan a dream start. Despite an overall disappointing season, they were dismantling the champions and sending a clear message. They'd be back stronger than ever next year. Verdejo nearly capped off the perfect performance with a free kick that rattled the crossbar. The match ended 2-0 and Milan closed out a turbulent campaign with a trophy. For the second consecutive year, Milan were Coppa Italia champions, once again beating Juventus in the final. For a moment, the team could forget the struggles of the past season as they celebrated another trophy under Andolini. It had been a tough and grueling season, but Andolini believed Milan were finally back on the right track. With the Coppa Italia trophy secured, Champions League qualification achieved, and promising youngsters breaking into the first team, foundations were in place for a strong resurgence. Andolini was eager to get back to work and lead Milan back to the summit of Italian football.
Shock coming out of the San Siro as treble-winning boss Antonio Andolini has been sacked. This comes just days after Milan's Coppa Italia triumph. It's understood that the Italian manager was blindsided, having already begun preparing for the new season. Sources close to the club suggest deepening financial issues as the primary reason behind the decision. Stay with us, as an official club statement is expected in the coming hours.
Andolini has just been sacked. The footballing world was stunned, as was Andolini himself. A treble winner, it is almost unthinkable that he'd be let go, even after what was considered a disappointing season by his usual high standards. No one had anticipated such a drastic move, especially after everything he'd achieved for Milan. As it turned out, Milan were facing serious financial instability. Chairman Lee had been struggling to meet the financial demands of his ownership and had begun defaulting on loan agreements. The club's treble-winning season had temporarily masked a mounting financial strain, but eventually, Lee grew desperate and began cutting costs in a last-ditch effort to retain control of the club. It became clear that Lee had been halting transfer activity not because of lack of ambition, but because he simply couldn't afford to spend any more money. And in one final, desperate act, he sacked Andolini in an attempt to claim the power. And so, Andolini's time in Milan had come to an end. He was heartbroken. He had poured his heart and soul into the club, a place that had become his second home, where he had made a name for himself and grown to love deeply. And now it was over, not because of his own failings, but due to someone else's mismanagement. He would go on to return to his original home in Corleone, Sicily, retreating to his vineyard in the countryside. Naturally, there were many suitors eager to bring him in, Juventus among them, along with several top clubs from abroad, but Andolini had no interest. His footballing home would always be Milan. He had no desire to live anywhere else but his hometown and his adopted city. At this stage of his career, he couldn't imagine starting over somewhere new. Despite the sense of unfinished business, he couldn't bring himself to move on. His heart would always remain in Milan, but that doesn't mean that it would always bleed red. After 4 long seasons in charge of AC Milan, which included 2 Scudetto wins, 3 Coppa Italia titles, and a Champions League trophy, Andolini was sacked due to financial mismanagement. He had risen from virtually unknown manager to one of the highest rated managers in Europe, and now he was out of a job. Milan fans were furious that Chairman Lee would sack a treble-winning manager, one of the greatest in the club's modern history, so unceremoniously. Their anger grew even further when within a year, Lee was forced to surrender the club to the American hedge fund, Elliott Management Corporation, after continuing to miss loan repayments. However, that was no longer Andolini's concern. He was now semi-retired, living in his vineyard in the countryside of Corleone, Sicily. He had received offers from other clubs, but he loved the city of Milan and refused to manage anywhere else in Italy or Europe. That was until he received an offer from Inter Milan to become their new manager. At first, he was hesitant to take over the fiercest rivals of the club he'd grown to love, but deep down, he still had a burning passion for the game and unfinished business and management. Inter offered the perfect opportunity to finish his career on his own terms. Andolini signed a 3-year deal to become the new manager of Inter Milan, with the intention of seeing out the contract and ending his managerial career when it concluded. And so, Andolini now had 3 seasons to restore Inter to the pinnacle of Italian and European football. It would not be an easy task, as Inter had just finished 7th place with a squad in need of serious overhaul. but Andolini has faced similar challenges before, and he was a perfect man for the job. Before any rebuild could begin, Andolini had to meet and assess the current squad. The captain surprisingly was 37-year-old Nemanja Vidic, who was still in decent shape for Serie A standards, while the vice captain was Matej Kovacic, who had grown into one of the best midfielders in Europe. Up front, the main man was Mario Balotelli, a player Andolini had famously passed on during his time at Milan. However, Andolini was now willing to work with the eccentric Italian, who had since established himself as a top striker in the league. Elsewhere, Inter had a few decent squad players, such as Shaqiri, Icardi, and Greek winger Mavropanos. But beyond that, the squad was lacking in quality and aging out. In goal, Samir Handanovic had departed for Real Madrid the previous season, leaving the unproven Paulo Gazzaniga as a current first choice. Andolini knew the summer transfer window would be crucial to kick-starting the new project. However, there was another player in Inter's academy who could contribute to the first team, an 18-year-old defensive midfielder named Lorenzo Mancini. He was immediately recommended to Andolini for promotion to the senior squad. The youngster was a nephew of former Inter manager and Scudetto winner Roberto Mancini. Lorenzo Mancini was already being touted as a future Inter captain and the next great Italian midfielder. Given Andolini's success with academy products in his final season at Milan, he is more than willing to integrate Mancini into the first team. In fact, he planned on making the young Italian a focal point of his rebuild, as his go-to deep-lying playmaker. Mancini wasn't the only academy product that Andolini was factoring into his plans. After years at Milan, he knew every inch of that club, and more importantly, he knew which youngsters to keep an eye out for. While Verdejo and Corrides were considered untouchable, Andolini quickly triggered the release clause of 17-year-old Greek fullback named Nikos Manos. A highly touted prospect with exceptional technical ability, Manos was a player Andolini hoped to mold into a world-class fullback. With the first signing out of the way, Andolini got to work clearing out the deadwood. He sold a staggering 9 players for a combined total of just £26.5 million. The amount recouped was underwhelming given the number of departures, but Andolini knew it was worth it to begin rebuilding the squad in his image. A major reason he joined Inter was the guaranteed investment from the board, who reassured him that they could afford the promised signings, unlike the situation at Milan. And so Andolini got to work, first aiming to improve the wing options. His first signing was experienced winger Samir Nasri from Manchester City for £23.5 million. Next, he brought in Tottenham outcast Eric Lamela for just £13.5 million. He then turned his attention to the defense, which was in desperate need of reinforcements. Staying in the Premier League, he signed Manchester United centre-back Chris Smalling for £14 million. His final signing of the window was left-back Marcos Alonso from Fiorentina for £8 million. Given Inter's limited appeal to top players at the time, Andolini felt that this was a solid first step towards rebuilding the club into title contenders. As the season drew near, Andolini had concerns about the squad, but ultimately hoped that they had enough quality to secure a Champions League spot. He knew that he needed to get the best out of a limited squad. He would set up in a 4-2-3-1 formation with Balotelli as the focal point of the attack. Nasri operated on the left wing while Shaqiri played through the middle. In midfield, Mancini and Kovacic formed a double pivot to shield the defense, which featured former Manchester United teammates Vidic and Smalling. Alonso and Santon started at fullbacks with Gazzaniga in goal. The Andolini era at Inter Milan began with a comfortable 3-1 victory away against Torino. Balotelli opened the season with a goal, while new signing Lamela made an immediate impact. Inter carried that momentum into an impressive start, going 7-2-1 in their first 10 matches, and climbing to an unexpected second place in the table. A highlight of the run was a dominant 5-2 win over Napoli at home, where Balotelli netted a hat-trick to bring his tally to 9 goals in 10 games. Nasri also got on the score sheet, quickly establishing himself as the key figure in the attack. However, not everything went smoothly. A Chris Smalling own goal handed Inter their first defeat under Andolini, a humbling moment in an otherwise strong opening stretch. Still, the team entered the Milan derby in fine form, with Andolini preparing for what was promised to be an emotional return. The first Milan derby since Andolini's sacking and subsequent move to Inter was, predictably, an emotionally charged affair. Unfortunately for neutrals, the match quickly devolved into an ugly display of hard tackles and non-stop fouling. Perhaps it is fitting given the lingering animosity between Andolini and Milan's upper management, who had failed to protect him from being dismissed. In the end, the game finished in a dull, albeit bruising, 0-0 draw. The draw in the Milan derby was followed by a disappointing 2-0 loss to Roma, which would unexpectedly become a pivotal moment in Andolini's project. After Gervinho's opening goal, a costly error from Gazzaniga highlighted the urgent need for a new goalkeeper. However, it was David Santon's poor performance and subsequent crash out that would shift the trajectory of the squad. Frustrated at being substituted early in the second half, Santon exchanged heated words with Andolini as he left the pitch, and it would prove to be his final appearance for Inter. In his place, young Nikos Manos stepped in and immediately impressed, showing he was ready for first-team football. Despite the defeat, Andolini inadvertently found a long-term solution at right back, with Manos quickly becoming the de facto starter for the rest of his tenure. Despite another poor performance from Gazzaniga against Lazio, Inter ended the year in otherwise solid form, earning 7 points from a possible 12. They finished the calendar year in third place, just 5 points off top and 1 point ahead of Milan. With the January transfer window open, David Santon departed the club following his row with Andolini, and Martin Montoya was brought in as a backup to Manos for £11.5 million. Yet that wouldn't be the only piece of business during the window, as Matej Kovacic unexpectedly handed in a transfer request. Andolini preferred to keep the talented Croatian, but if he wasn't committed to the project, he was more than willing to let him leave. So Barcelona ended up paying a massive £55 million for the Croatian midfielder. As the window's deadline approached, Andolini returned to the Premier League, this time signing Ramirez from Chelsea for £15 million to partner alongside Mancini in the midfield. Inter started the year with a commanding 4-1 statement win over Juventus, Andolini's first clash against the club since his arrival. Nazari continued his excellent form, scoring twice, including a brilliant curling effort. Manos also reinforced why he became a starting right back, providing an assist to secure his fourth goal. The win kicked off a near flawless January and February run as Inter went 7-1-0 in the league to start the year. The stretch also included a 5-1 dismantling of Fiorentina in the Coppa Italia quarterfinal, setting up a dramatic semi-final clash against Milan. The first leg was far more entertaining for neutrals than the earlier league clash between the two sides. Unfortunately for Andolini, it was a rough night for Inter as Milan struck early, with Leroy Fer leaving Gazzaniga frozen like a statue. Inter looked disorganized, and a header from Lacazette nearly led to disaster, with Gazzaniga fumbling the shot and deflecting it off his own player. A solid defensive effort from Smalling then prevented Lacazette from doubling Milan's lead. However, the Englishman undid all his good work in the 90th minute, botching a clearance that sent Lacazette through on goal. The Frenchman made no mistake, slotting home to make it 2-0. The disappointing first leg loss raised concerns among fans that Andolini had some kind of mental block against his former club. The 3-2 win in the return leg did little to ease those fears, as Inter crashed out of the Coppa Italia. It was a frantic back-and-forth game in which Inter never gained control. Every Inter goal was swiftly answered by a Milan strike, leaving them unable to mount a proper comeback. Andolini had won silverware in every season he had managed so far, but the 4-3 aggregate defeat meant there would be no cup success in his first season at Inter. Still, an outside chance at a shock Scudetto win remained alive. Unfortunately, despite a late winner from Lamella and Naples, any hope of a title run for Inter went up in smoke after a poor stretch of 5 losses in the next 9 games. It began with a 2-0 defeat at home to Fiorentina, a team they had comfortably beaten in the Coppa Italia. Embarrassing losses to mid-table teams like Sampdoria soon followed, all but ending their Scudetto ambitions. A disastrous goalkeeping display from Gazzaniga against Roma officially ended any remaining title hopes. The Argentine had consistently been the weak link in Andolini's side, and it's painfully clear that a replacement was needed in the summer. The poor run left Inter 12 points adrift from the league leaders Roma, yet they still remained in a strong position to qualify for Champions League, especially with the fourth and final Milan derby on the horizon. A Mario Balotelli penalty saw Inter walk away with all 3 points after a rash tackle from Pepe. Andolini had finally gotten one over his former side, securing a big win in the race for Champions League qualification. Yet that crucial victory was rendered meaningless in the very next match, as Inter fell 1-0 away to Lazio. Inter's final chance to hold on to third place came in a decisive clash against Juventus, with both sides level in points and Inter only ahead on goal difference. In a match that summed up Inter's season, defensive frailties once again cost him dearly. Poor marking left Gazzaniga exposed, and the keeper did very little to stop Juventus from taking their chances. What had seemed like a momentum-shifting win against Milan ultimately proved to be false hope, as Inter finished 4th, one place shy of the Champions League qualification. Meanwhile, Roma became the first team outside of Milan and Juventus to win the Scudetto since Andolini's arrival in the Serie A. Surprisingly, Milan slumped to 5th place, ending the season below Inter as financial instability at the club began to spill onto the pitch. In terms of end-of-season accolades, Balotelli finished 2nd in the Golden Boot race, with new Juventus signing Robert Lewandowski claiming both the Golden Boot and Most Valuable Player award. Gervinho secured the Top Assist Provider award, while Lopez once again took home the Golden Glove. Balotelli was the only Inter player named in the Team of the Season, with Roma dominating the selections. Balotelli was named Inter's Player of the Season after a standout campaign in which the Italian recorded 23 goals and 7 assists in 31 matches, finishing as both the club's top scorer and leading assist provider. Nasri followed as the second highest goal scorer with 15 goals, as the Frenchman proved to be a revelation. Meanwhile, Icardi, Shaqiri, and Mahrez had solid seasons, but the end-of-season stats revealed a clear issue of an unbalanced squad, overly reliant on a small group of key players. Andolini looked to resolve the team's over-reliance on the key players as the 2019 summer transfer window opened, with Inter still reeling from the late-season collapse. Unfortunately, without Champions League football, big-name signings were difficult to secure, forcing Andolini to get creative with his dealings. As with the previous season, his first order of business was clearing out the deadwood. He sold a number of unused squad players, with 10 departures generating £28.8 million. With an increased transfer budget and room in the squad, Andolini finally moved to replace Gazzaniga as the club's number 1. The Argentine had endured a disastrous season under Andolini, and it was clear that Inter could not progress any further with him in goal. To fill the void, Andolini signed veteran goalkeeper Victor Valdez from Manchester United for £15.5 million. The Spaniard was enjoying a late career resurgence and would be a major upgrade between the posts. Another player experiencing a late career resurgence was former Inter loanee Lucas Podolski, who had left Arsenal and become one of the Bundesliga's top scorers with Schalke. Andolini would bring him back to the San Siro for £12.5 million, promising a more impactful second stint. Elsewhere, the Italian boss brought in another familiar face in veteran midfielder Thiago Motta to bolster the squad depth and add leadership in the dressing room. Staying in Paris, Andolini also signed David Luiz for £23.5 million to shore up the defense. And finally, seeking more creativity in the attack, Andolini once again turned to the Bundesliga, signing Henrik Mkhitaryan for £21.5 million. With the busy transfer window finally behind them, Inter felt confident in the squad that Andolini had assembled, as the Italian entered year 2 of his 3-year contract. The team saw defensive improvements with the arrival of Valdez, Luiz, and Motta, while Podolski and Mkhitaryan were expected to contribute goals and assists. Perhaps the most notable change of the offseason, however, was the announcement of the new vice-captain Lorenzo Mancini. With club captain Vidic's role diminishing, Andolini placed his full trust in the Inter Academy product, who had just enjoyed a standout campaign the previous year. And finally, the season got underway with Inter making a dramatic start, going 9-1-1 in their first 11 games. It began with a 1-0 win over Napoli, where Balotelli picked up right where he left off the previous season. The early run also featured 2 last-minute heroics. First, Balotelli scored a 90th minute equalizer against Lazio, and Lucas Podolski netted the 90th minute winner against the reigning champions Roma at home. The Nerazzurri had kicked off their campaign in thrilling fashion and sat in second place, just behind surprise league leaders Sampdoria. But Milan would get a chance to declare their title intentions, with games against Milan, Sampdoria, and Juventus all coming up in a row. The first game saw Inter run out 3-0 victors in the Milan derby, as Andolini had seemingly overcome any jitters facing his former side. The new signings were all proving their worth, as Valdez showed why he was an upgrade on Gazzaniga, while Podolski was proving to be a useful super sub. A definitive win over Sampdoria followed, as Nasri's brace gave Inter a 2-1 win over the title pretenders. Inter were proving to be the real deal, as the Nerazzurri headed to Turin. Thanks to a brilliant Balotelli brace, Inter finished the game as definitive 3-0 winners, finally stamping their claim on the title. Yet one signing had been struggling to adapt. Henrik Mkhitaryan was finding life in Serie A difficult and delivered a poor display in Turin. He was reluctantly substituted just before the half-hour mark, with Andolini understanding his disappointment. However, what the manager did not understand or tolerate was Mkhitaryan's poor attitude on the bench. As his teammates were celebrating a big victory, he sat sulking in the stands. Inter were quickly running away with the league title, sitting atop of the table just before the turn of the new year, 5 points clear of second place with a game in hand. Andolini had hoped to finish the year strong with a victory away in Florence. However, Mkhitaryan's frustrations would soon boil over. With the side trailing 1-0, Andolini turned to the Armenian with the hopes of him redeeming himself for his previous incident. Instead, Mkhitaryan committed a reckless tackle in the box and was shown a straight red card. His petulant and unnecessary challenge condemned Inter to a 3-0 defeat. Andolini had seen enough. He made it immediately clear that Henrik Mkhitaryan had played his final game for Inter. With the winter window now open, Andolini quickly sent Mkhitaryan out on loan to Marseille for the remainder of the season. To replace him, he opted for a slightly different profile, bringing in hard-working Moussa Sissoko from Newcastle for £12 million. With the distraction of Mkhitaryan gone, Inter picked up 12 points from the possible 15 in January. This included another emphatic 3-0 victory over Milan, as Andolini continued to assert his dominance over the club that had sacked him. The match also saw Mancini score a brace of penalties, with the midfielder rapidly establishing himself as a true leader within the team. Then on transfer deadline day, news suddenly broke that Gonzalo Higuain had requested a move away from Napoli. With very little time remaining in the window, Andolini convinced the board to sanction a move for the Argentine striker. And so for £38 million, Andolini got his man, adding even more firepower up top. The prospect of a Balotelli-Higuain partnership was too tempting to ignore, and it was a duo that would strike fear into the rest of the Serie A. Of course, the first game after the window closed was a return to Naples for Higuain. Nasri opened the scoring with a moment of brilliance, and right on cue, Higuain came off the bench to make his debut, scoring against his former side. He finished him off with a second goal as Inter ran out 3-0 victors, though Higuain chose not to celebrate against his old club. The Balotelli-Higuain partnership was already paying dividends, as Inter tore through the Serie A with another record of 9-1-1, mirroring the strong start to the season. When the two weren't paired up top together, Andolini had the luxury of bringing off a fresh, world-class striker from the bench. The run led to a title-clinching showdown against second-place Juventus, with Andolini on the verge of reclaiming the Scudetto, this time with Inter Milan. It was a dull 0-0 affair until a deflected shot saw vice-captain Mancini score the game-winning goal in a 1-0 victory that sealed the title. Though the title had felt like a foregone conclusion heading into the match, it was anything but guaranteed when Andolini first took over. He had now completed a historic turnaround to deliver at Scudetto. Andolini also made history by becoming the first ever manager to win the Scudetto with both AC Milan and Inter Milan. It was the first goal he set for himself when he joined the club, and it felt all the sweeter to prove to the world that he would not be defined by how things ended at Milan. Meanwhile, in the Europa League, Inter breezed through a relatively weak group stage, heavily rotating the starting 11 throughout it. Entering the knockout phase, their dominance continued as they swept past CSKA Moscow 5-1 in aggregate, Sporting 6-1 in aggregate, and Everton 4-3. Andolini stuck to his philosophy of heavy rotation, saving his starters for the league while giving opportunities to others. Players like Icardi took center stage in the Europa League, while signings like Moussa Sissoko also played a major role, with the Frenchman contributing several crucial goals. The Europa League adventure brought a familiar semi-final opponent for Andolini, as Inter were drawn against Manchester City. Andolini had previously knocked out the Citizens in the Champions League while managing Milan, and now had the chance to defeat them again, this time in the Europa League, en route to the final. Just like before, two former City players in the form of Samir Nasri and Mario Balotelli were set to face their old club for the first time. Within minutes, Balotelli struck against his former side, scoring the opening goal of the semi-final. But City weren't going down without a fight. Alvaro Negredo blasted a shot past Gazzaniga, who was starting in place of an injured Valdez, to level the score. Shortly after, more misfortune struck Inter as Shaqiri landed awkwardly and injured his knee, forcing an early substitution. Moments later, Negredo scored again, putting City up 2-1 as things quickly unraveled for Inter. However, it was another ex-City player who would turn the tide, as Samir Nasri weaved his way into the box and calmly slotted home to level the match once again. With the game seemingly destined to end in a 0-0 draw, a dazzling solo run from Manos led to Balotelli scoring his second of the night, giving Inter a 3-2 advantage. Then, in a desperate attempt at an equalizer, Joe Hart came out for a last-minute corner, but instead of a heroic moment, Gazzaniga claimed the cross and launched the ball forward. Balotelli's flicked header set off a foot race between Samir Nasri and Gonzalo Higuain. The slower German couldn't keep up, and the Argentine calmly slotted in an empty net for Inter's fourth away goal, sealing a stunning 4-2 win in the first leg and effectively ending the tie. A 1-1 scoreline in the return leg would see Inter move on to the final to face Besiktas. But first, a 0-0 draw at the end of the season served as a backdrop for Inter's title celebrations. Mancini was given the honor for lifting the Scudetto, an academy graduate living out his ultimate dream. It was a joyous moment for the fans, who had endured many rough and trophyless seasons. Now, thanks to Andolini, Inter were back on top of Italian football. Focus quickly shifted to the Europa League final as Inter prepared for their first European final since the 2010 Champions League triumph under Jose Mourinho. North London would host the showdown, with both teams battling out for European glory. Besiktas were worthy opponents, having knocked out Andolini's former side Milan on the way to the final. Just 20 minutes in though, Greek winger Mavras rounded the keeper, got trips, but would still manage to sweep the ball into the net from the ground. An inventive piece of improvised finishing that gave Inter the dream start. Unfortunately for the Turkish side, Inter were simply too much to handle. Balotelli headed in a second goal from a corner, and moments later the Italian calmly slotted home another to seal a 3-0 victory for Inter. At full time, Inter were crowned European champions once again. It might not have been the Champions League, but the Europa League trophy was a welcome prize for a club that had endured so many years without silverware. Mancini once again lifted the trophy, with the young Italian quickly making a name for himself as one of Europe's brightest emerging stars. It was yet another trophy for Andolini, and the long-awaited return to prominence for Inter. The club had made a loud statement that they were coming for the Champions League next. And that statement came through loud and clear as Inter finished the season as dominant champions, earning the second highest points tally in the club's history. Meanwhile, Milan continued to struggle following Andolini's departure, with a change in ownership further destabilizing the squad. Mario Balotelli claimed both the Golden Boot and the Most Valuable Player awards. After a stellar season, Victor Valdez proved to be a critical signing, winning the Golden Glove despite missing the final month of the campaign. And Trevino was once again the top assist provider. Unlike the previous season, Inter dominated the Team of the Season selections, with Valdez, Smalling, David Luiz, Nasri, and Shaqiri all joining Balotelli in the lineup. Meanwhile, Tevez was once again selected, as he seemed like an almost eternal fixture in the team. Balotelli was once again named Inter's Player of the Season after recording 29 goals and 12 assists in 47 matches, finishing as both the club's top goal scorer and leading assist provider. Nasri once again proved his worth as the second highest goal scorer in the team with 18 goals, while Higuain and Podolski provided a vital spark to the attack. Lastly, Shaqiri enjoyed another solid season under Andolini. And so, with the 2019-20 season finished, Andolini entered the final year of both his contract and his managerial career, and he had one goal in mind: to get his hands on the Champions League trophy one last time. Inter were among the clear favorites heading into the season, but with the summer window now open, Andolini wanted to ensure his side had the experience needed to go all the way. With this being his final season, Andolini no longer had any need to build for the future. Instead, he started the window off with a bang, bringing back club icon Wesley Sneijder for £30 million. The Dutch midfielder had previously won the Champions League with Inter, and Andolini was eager to inject that kind of experience into his squad. He was also brought in to fill the creative midfielder void left by Henrik Mkhitaryan, whose fallout with the manager of the previous season had sealed his fate. The Armenian was sold in the summer for a cut price of £14 million to Everton, after it became well known that Andolini wanted him out. Mauro Icardi also departed, sold for £34.5 million to Atletico Madrid, after being made redundant by the arrival of Gonzalo Higuain. Elsewhere, Andolini brought back two more former players. First, Julio Cesar, who returned to provide competent backup, with Gazzaniga not even fit to be a number 2 option. The second was Sully Montari, who had revitalized his career at Sampdoria. Ironically, Andolini had sold the Ghanaian in his debut season at Milan, yet he was more than willing to bring him back now, as a reliable defensive option off the bench. Finally, Andolini wrapped up the window by signing Cesar Azpilicueta for £26.4 million to further reinforce the defense. Andolini entered his final year in management with an experienced and battle-tested squad. The team was already league and European champions, boasting two of the most clinical strikers in the continent. Yet the Italian manager hoped that the additions of the seasoned veterans would be the final piece needed to capture the elusive Champions League trophy. The season began with what had become a yearly tradition, Andolini facing Juventus in the Supercoppa. And, staying true to the tradition, Andolini's side emerged victorious with a thrilling 120th minute winner from Higuain in extra time, kicking off the season with a trophy. They followed that up with their first official statement of intent for the Champions League, defeating Real Madrid in UEFA Super Cup, thanks to a brace from Schneider on his return to the club. The first half of Inter's title defense resembled a distracted team, with their eyes set on a much bigger prize. Andolini's side won 14-4-3 in their first 21 league games of the season. The run featured several big wins, including a 4-1 dismantling of Napoli at home, a dramatic late winner from Mutari in the Milan derby, and a Higuain brace that sealed a comfortable 2-0 victory over Roma. Yet the same stretch still had some lapses in focus, with points dropped against lesser sides like Genoa, Sampdoria, and Bologna. Inter appeared hyper-focused on the Champions League, so much so that the performance against lower-tier Serie A clubs suffered, with the club seemingly only rising to the occasion in marquee matches. And yet their focus on the Champions League ultimately backfired on them early on, with a middling start to the group stage, with 2 1-1 draws against Wolfsburg and Malmö, left them sitting in second place ahead of a crucial match against Arsenal. The North London side arrived looking to seize control of the group, while Andolini's men were desperate to ignite their campaign. It was a tense and back-and-forth encounter, with Arsenal missing a golden opportunity to take the lead when Alexis Sanchez squandered an absolute point-blank tap-in. Inter capitalized on Arsenal's wastefulness after earning a penalty, which Mario Balotelli coolly converted to secure a desperately needed 1-0 win. That result ended up being a turning point, as Inter picked up 7 points from their final 3 matches, including a late equalizer from Balotelli at the Emirates, a goal that allowed Inter to leapfrog Arsenal and finish top of the group. Their reward was a round of 16 matchup against Sevilla, as Andolini's final European campaign continued with the hopes of ending his career on a high. A notable development in the first half of the season was Mancini's rise to superstardom. The Italian had become a de facto leader of the team, a role cemented by his man-of-the-match performance against Juventus. The young midfielder scored twice and then set up Schneider for a goal, with a brilliant backheel to seal a commanding 3-0 victory. Thanks in large part to Mancini's leadership, Inter sat atop of the table at the halfway mark, though just 1 point clear. With a big return fixture against Juventus looming, Andolini hoped that his team could finally pull away from the rest of the pack. Instead, disaster struck. Inter found themselves 3-0 down in the first 40 minutes in Turin. The Nerazzurri were shell-shocked as Juventus tore them apart, and its title race looked to be wide open, as the defending champions were imploding. But Andolini's side responded with the heart of a true champion. Schneider's curling effort before the break sparked life into the team, and Gonzalo Higuain added a second early on in the second half, and his scrappy goal, barely forced over the line by Manos, completed the remarkable comeback. Juventus were left stunned, and Inter had salvaged not just a point, but their title ambitions. The comeback in Turin sparked what would ultimately become the title-clinching run, as Inter went undefeated for the rest of the season, winning 11 and drawing 5 on their way to the second consecutive Scudetto. It was a dominant stretch where Inter cruised through the league, delivering Andolini one last domestic title before his retirement. But that wasn't the ending that he truly craved. He still dreamt of one last elusive Champions League triumph. Inter began the knockout phase against Sevilla, advancing to the quarterfinals with a 4-3 aggregate victory, sealed by a 3-2 win at home. In the quarterfinals, they were drawn against a familiar face, former Inter manager Jose Mourinho, now in charge of Chelsea. Chelsea's defensive, disciplined, and pragmatic style were a perfect counter to Andolini's 5-3-2 setup in European competitions. On a snowy night at Stamford Bridge, Chelsea thoroughly dominated Inter. Diego Costa's clinical finishing made the difference, as the London side walked away with a 2-0 victory in the first leg. Andolini's dream now hung on by a thread. The Nerazzurri would need to overturn a 2-0 deficit, but as the saying goes, 90 minutes in the San Siro can feel like a very long time. Determined to fight back, Andolini altered his approach. He lined up Inter in a bold 3-4-3, making it clear that he would attack from the start. They had to, as Chelsea's defense was one of the best in Europe, and now featured Andolini's former star Jan Vertonghen. Chelsea's defense lived up to its reputation early on, repelling wave after wave of Inter's attacks as Andolini's side grew increasingly frustrated. Then came the first mistake of the match from Chelsea, pounced on by Schneider, who forced the ball into the net to equalize for Inter. The San Siro erupted and the stadium was rocking as Chelsea looked suddenly shaken. Soon after, another costly error left their visitors completely rattled, as they gave away a penalty in the 80th minute. Balotelli stepped up and calmly converted, just as he had done all season. Inter had overturned their first leg deficit and Chelsea were crumbling as the match headed to extra time. And it was there where an unlikely hero emerged. Substitute Mavropanos sliced through Chelsea's defense and blasted a shot past Cech to give Inter the lead. Chelsea had nothing left to offer as Inter had done it and made the comeback, and would now go on to advance to the semi-finals with a dramatic 3-2 aggregate win. And now, perhaps the most familiar opponent awaited Andolini in the semi-finals. Juventus, the club that had come to define his managerial career. They were an unstoppable force when he first arrived, and over the years he had battled them for countless trophies. And now he'd have to go through them one last time to achieve his dream and reach a Champions League final. The first leg was played in the San Siro, with both sides dreaming of a place in the final. As they had done in the past, Juventus struck early, and Andolini's dream was already beginning to slip away. Thankfully for Inter, a response came before halftime, as Shaqiri found space in the box and slotted home the equalizer. The rest of the second leg was largely uneventful, save for the dirty shove by Morata on David Luiz that somehow went unpunished. Back in Turin for the second leg, the match remained deadlocked until a stunning free kick from Wesley Schneider broke the silence. The Dutch midfielder had been enjoying a remarkable return to the club, and now he had just put them one foot firmly into the final. Moments later, Juventus thought they had drawn level, as Morata found the back of the net, only for the goal to be ruled offside. Juventus fans were furious, but replays confirmed that the linesman had in fact got the call right. Juventus would come to rue that moment, as Shaqiri's second goal of the tie sealed the win. Inter were now Champions League finalists for the first time since 2010, and Andolini had claimed one last victory over his most fiercest and most persistent rivals. Inter would face Barcelona in the Champions League final, arguably one of the best teams in Europe, led by the best player in the world. But before that, Andolini had to manage his final Serie A match, which also happened to be his last Milan derby, a fitting finale that would end with the Scudetto celebrations. It was a poetic ending in Italy for Andolini. The two clubs he had rebuilt into European powerhouses, and the city that had changed his life forever, came together for his farewell. He loved Milan deeply, and although his time at AC Milan ended on difficult terms, having a Serie A send-off in the Milan derby was a perfect way to bow out. It'd be one of the friendliest Milan derbies of his tenure, as Balotelli's early penalty in the game secured a 1-0 win for Inter, with the match lacking any of the usual heat and ferocity. In the end, Inter would lift the trophy for the final time in Andolini's career, as he got to celebrate his last domestic triumph in his adopted city, in front of both of the fan bases that had left an everlasting mark on his life. But obviously, one final game remained, the Champions League final, a match that would define the legacy of his managerial career. Held at the Olympic Stadion, both sides dreamt of leaving Berlin as champions of Europe, but for Andolini, this was a dream he could not afford to let slip through his fingers. Inter were up against an elite Barcelona side, one that featured a familiar face in the former Inter wonder kid, Mateo Kovacic. But Inter had their own new star in Lorenzo Mancini, now captaining the side. Andolini set his side up in his 5-3-2 formation to counter Barcelona's possession-based play. The stage was set. There was just 90 minutes remaining in Andolini's legendary managerial career. Both sides nearly got off to dream starts, as Busquets narrowly pulled his shot wide just 2 minutes in. And moments later, Schneider was denied by a crucial Gerard Piqué block. Then, a mistake from David Luiz allowed Neymar to pounce and open the scoring for Barcelona. But almost immediately after, Iniesta brought down Balotelli in the box, gifting Inter a penalty. Up stepped Mario Balotelli, arguably the best penalty taker in Europe, who would miss his first ever penalty on the biggest stage of his career. Inter were stunned. They knew they might have just squandered the best chance to get back into the match. But a familiar hero rose to the occasion. Wesley Schneider took the game by his own hands, skipping past defenders to level the score. Moments later, Schneider stepped up yet again, with his incredible through ball finding Balotelli, who made up for his earlier miss by calmly slotting Inter into a 2-1 lead. In their greatest hour of need, Schneider had once again answered the call. From there, the momentum was all Inter. In the final moments of the match, Mario Balotelli added a tap-in to make it 3-1. Then a rare goal from Ramirez sealed Barcelona's fate once and for all. The final whistle blew and marked the end of Andolini's legendary managerial career, with Inter crowned champions of Europe for just the 4th time in their history. Their young captain Mancini lifted the trophy, becoming one of the youngest ever to do so, while Inter fans celebrated one of the greatest teams in the club's history. It was an emotional moment for Andolini. The Italian had done it. He achieved his dream, finishing his career on his own terms, after it once seemed destined to end in heartbreak at AC Milan. And so Andolini's 3-year contract with Inter ran its course, and the Italian's illustrious career was over. Over 7 seasons with AC Milan and Inter Milan, Andolini amassed an impressive trophy cabinet that included 4 Scudetti, 3 Coppa Italia titles, 4 Supercoppas, 2 UEFA Super Cups, 1 Europa League, and finally 2 Champions League trophies. In total, he won 16 trophies, averaging more than 2 per season. He would end his career as one of the most decorated and successful Italian managers in history, and more importantly, Andolini had gone out on his own terms. And so he bid farewell to his adopted city of Milan, a place that he had come to love, as he returned to his vineyard in the countryside of Corleone. There he would spend his remaining days polishing his medals and sipping on red wine. No longer the forgotten man he once was, but a legend who had gone from a nobody to a somebody that the world would never forget. Just when he thought he was out, they pulled him back in. It had been 3 months since Antonio Andolini's retirement. The Italian had been enjoying a quiet life on his vineyard in the countryside of Corleone, far from the noise and chaos of football. But that peace would soon be interrupted, as the world of management had come calling once again. This time it wasn't a club knocking on his door, but the Italian national team. Representatives arrived at his estate, ready to convince Andolini to become the Azzurri's next head coach. At first he was resistant. After 7 emotionally draining years at AC Milan and Inter, he believed that he had nothing left to give to the game. The reduced workload and lighter schedule of international football was tempting, but Andolini remained adamant that he was retired. But they made him an offer that he couldn't refuse, the chance to become the savior of his beloved nation. Italy was in ruins. Since their 2006 World Cup triumph in Germany, the national team had been spiraling. Group stage exits in the 2010 and 2014 World Cups, a disappointing Euro 2008, and despite a respectable run to the Euro 2012 final, they had fallen short of their high expectations. Yet things only got worse, as they crashed out of the Euro 2016 group stage behind Slovenia, and followed that up by failing to qualify for the 2018 World Cup, and barely escaped their group in the 2020 Euros, only to be knocked out by Germany in the quarterfinals. The reputation of Italian football had taken a pounding, so the federation presented him with a simple proposal. 1 contract, 1 tournament, the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. It was a perfect offer. Andolini had no energy for a long rebuild, and Italy needed a steady hand to restore credibility. The goal was clear for Andolini: stabilize the squad and restore pride, and if he could pull off some magic, win the whole thing. And so, just weeks before World Cup qualifying kicked off, Antonio Andolini came out of retirement and took the helm of the Italian national team. The first order of business was clear. Andolini would need to assess the national team's talent pool. There's an aging core of veterans who had become part of the furniture at this point. The list included Giorgio Chiellini, Leonardo Bonucci, Daniele De Rossi, Claudio Marchisio, Antonio Candreva, and Giuseppe Rossi. Players who had featured in or hovered around the squad since Euro 2008 and the 2010 World Cup. Now, if Andolini had been hired for a full-scale rebuild, most of the veteran core would have been shown the door to make way for the next generation. But fortunately for them, Andolini wasn't there to start over. He was here to get the best out of what he had to work with, and that meant that the veterans would play a crucial role in the upcoming World Cup. In contrast, there was a solid group of young players and other players entering their primes, like Salvatore Sirigu, Antonio Balzano, David Zappacosta, Lorenzo Insigne, Simone Zaza, and Berardi, all of whom would play key roles under Andolini's leadership. And finally, there is a familiar contingent of players from his Milan and Inter days. Gianmarco Bonaventura, Andrea Poli, Matteo De Sciglio, Marco Verratti, Lorenzo Mancini, Stefan El Shaarawy, Ciro Immobile, and Mario Balotelli. While working with the Milan players again could bring some tension, Andolini knew he could trust each of them when it mattered most. Andolini would need to rely on these players to guide Italy through a tricky World Cup qualification group. The group featured a talented Portuguese side led by Cristiano Ronaldo, who was still chasing the elusive World Cup trophy. It also included strong contenders like Russia, Switzerland, and Norway, who were all more than capable of causing upsets. And notably Slovenia, the very side that had knocked Italy out of Euro 2016, who stood as a painful reminder of how far the Azzurri had fallen. If Italy were to return to the World Cup stage, Andolini would need to navigate one of the toughest qualification groups in Europe. Andolini's first set of call-ups would mostly reflect the core group he would rely on moving forward. Aside from taking a closer look at midfield maestro Jorginho and Benfica youth prospect Nicola Megarini, Andolini had a clear vision of what the ideal squad would be for him. Daniele De Rossi was named the captain of the squad, with the surprise appointment of Lorenzo Mancini as a vice-captain. Andolini had long been a supporter of Mancini, giving him his big break on the club level, and now he was ready to entrust him with a leadership role on the international stage. In terms of a tactical setup, Andolini favored a 4-3-3 formation to make the most of Italy's deep pool of central midfielders. Captain Daniele De Rossi was deployed in the holding role, while Lorenzo Mancini was played in a more advanced position than Andolini had typically played him in during his time at Inter. The agent Claudio Marchisio would share time with Marco Verratti in the midfield, while the veteran duo of Chiellini and Bonucci anchored the defense. And most importantly, Mario Balotelli was entrusted to lead the line, just like he had done under Andolini at Inter. Now he is one of Europe's most clinical strikers. Balotelli's firepower would be vital to Italy's hopes on the road to Qatar. And finally, Andolini's tenure with the national team would begin with an opening match on the road to Qatar, with an opportunity for Italy to exact revenge on Slovenia. And exact revenge they did as Italy emphatically dismantled Slovenia, finally putting to rest the painful memories of 2016. Mario Balotelli was the star of the show, immediately repaying Andolini's faith in him with an incredible 4-goal performance. It was a statement win as Italy announced that they were back. A hard-fought 2-1 victory on home soil against Russia followed, giving the Azzurri the perfect start for the qualifying campaign as they prepared for a crucial early clash against Cristiano Ronaldo and Portugal. Italy welcomed Portugal to Rome with both sides aiming to seize control of the group. But it'd be Andolini's men who'd strike first, with De Rossi threading a perfect pass to Mancini, who calmly slotted it home to give the host a dream start, as Italy seemed to be flying under Andolini. But Portugal would hit back. A scrappy play in the box ended with Cristiano Ronaldo acrobatically firing home the equalizer for Portugal, practically rendering Italy's early breakthrough meaningless. Then, in what would unfortunately become a recurring issue, Salvatore Sirigu misjudged a cross, leaving him stranded as Nani, a former Andolini player at Milan, rose to nod Portugal into the lead. With time running out, Italy needed a response, and it came from Mario Balotelli, whose header crashed off the bar and over the line. Goal line technology confirmed the equalizer, sparking hope across the Stadio Olimpico that Italy could grab another late goal. But the final word would belong to Lorenzo Insigne. In the 90th minute, the winger danced through the box and coolly finished past Rui Patricio, sealing a dramatic 3-2 win. It was a crucial victory for Andolini, one that firmly established Italy as a team to beat in the group. However, a 1-0 loss in Moscow saw Italy immediately lose their footing in the group, leaving Andolini frustrated by the lack of concentration. Fortunately, Italy still topped the group after the opening 4 games, thanks to goal difference. The Azzurri were in a strong position early on, but Andolini remained wary of the team's past shortcomings. He was determined to refocus the squad after the stumble against Russia, hoping to avoid repeating the same mistakes that had led to the nation's previous failings. Thanks to a strong run of form over the next 3 matches, Italy managed to avoid the missteps of previous campaigns, at least for now. Andolini's men stayed focused and handled their business against the group's lesser sides. Back-to-back comfortable victories over Norway and Slovenia solidified their position at the top, while a dramatic late winner against Switzerland in Rome pushed Italy one step closer to qualification as the final stretch of fixtures approached. As things stood, Italy sat atop of the group with 18 points, while Portugal trailed behind in second with 14. Russia were a distant third, and the rest of the group had all but fallen out of qualification. However, a frustrating night in Switzerland saw Italy held to a goalless draw, a minor setback that suddenly threatened to lead to a late collapse. With Portugal now just 1 point behind them, all eyes turned to an upcoming showdown between the two nations. Unfortunately, Andolini's men failed to rise to the occasion. A ruthless brace from Cristiano Ronaldo secured a victory for Portugal, stunning Italy. Despite a promising start under Andolini, Italy were once again faltering at a critical moment, now in real danger of missing out on automatic qualification. And so Italy returned home to face Norway in the final group match, while Portugal traveled to Slovenia needing just a win to finish in first. In a turn of fortune, it was Slovenia, the team that haunted Italy for years, who came to their rescue, holding Portugal to a tense 2-2 draw and handing Italy a golden opportunity to top the group. Back in Rome, Andolini's men were struggling to break down a resilient Norwegian defense, as the score remained 0-0 for 80 frustrating minutes. But then a moment of brilliance from Stefan El-Shaarawy broke the deadlock. His stunning strike sealed Italy's return to the World Cup for the first time since 2014. For their return to the grand stage, Italy was handed a favorable draw, grouped alongside Poland, Scotland, and Egypt. On paper, it appeared to be one of the easiest groups, but Andolini refused to see it that way. Despite Italy's proud footballing history, they hadn't progressed past the group stage since 2006 and failed to even qualify in 2018. Andolini had no intention on sharing the same fate as his predecessors by underestimating the task at hand. He knew better than to take any opponent lightly. Andolini's final 23-man squad for the World Cup closely resembled the group that had secured Italy's ticket to Qatar. The only changes saw Jorginho and Megarini replaced by two of Andolini's former Milan players, Andrea Poli and Ciro Immobile. The rest of the squad remained largely unchanged, with their veteran core still central to Andolini's plans, as this tournament served as a final hurrah for many of them. Meanwhile, the error-prone Sirigu was still Italy's number one, with the nation lacking quality in the goalkeeping department. And lastly, up front, Mario Balotelli continued to lead the line as the focal point of Italy's attack. And finally, Italy's long-awaited return to the World Cup began with a group stage opener against Scotland. It was a monumental moment for the nation. After 8 long years, the Azzurri were back on football's greatest stage. But more importantly, there was a growing belief that this Italian side had the potential to make a deep run. However, Italy's return to the World Cup proved frustrating. Mario Balotelli struggled in front of goal, and the rest of the team failed to rise to the occasion. The Azzurri struck the post multiple times, and the match seemed destined to end in a goalless draw. Then El-Shaarawy took matters into his own hands, with a brilliant solo run that broke Scotland's defense in the 70th minute, finally giving Italy a deserved lead after relentless pressure. But just as they seemed to have the game won, they lost concentration again. An 89th minute equalizer from Scotland spoiled the occasion, leaving Italy to settle for a 1-1 draw in their long-awaited return to the World Cup, as the team was struggling to find their shooting boots. Up next was a must-win clash against Egypt, with Italy desperate to ignite their World Cup campaign after the late setback against Scotland. The match also marked a reunion for Andolini with his former Milan player Mohamed Salah, someone the Italian manager knew could be extremely dangerous. Fortunately for Italy, Salah was kept quiet by their back line, and once again it was Stefan El-Shaarawy who rose to the occasion, scoring another brilliant solo goal to seal Italy's first World Cup victory since their 2014 victory over England. The win saw them sitting in second place heading into the final group game against the leaders Poland. While Italy were seemingly on the verge of reaching the round of 16, a slip-up could be fatal, but Andolini had no interest in playing it safe and was determined to win the group. And he would get his wish just 2 minutes into the game as El-Shaarawy struck again with another great solo effort, his third in as many games. El-Shaarawy was quickly becoming one of the standout performers of the tournament, as Italy's 1-0 win over Poland not only secured their place in the knockout round, but also saw them finish atop of the group. In the round of 16, Italy were drawn against the United States, a tricky opponent they had previously tied against in the group stage of the 2006 World Cup win. Optimism was building around Italy as it finally seemed that the team was clicking at just the right time. Finishing had been a recurring issue throughout the tournament, but El Shaarawy's electric form had offered hope of a deep run. And just 12 minutes into the match, Mario Balotelli finally opened his account with a nearly 18-yard header from a brilliant cross by Belzano. Italy looked poised for their first World Cup knockout win since 2006. Then a risky challenge from De Sciglio nearly gave the United States a penalty and a potential equalizer. Instead, Italy capitalized moments later as Candreva coolly slotted home a second goal to double their lead. It appeared Italy were cruising to the quarterfinals, but once again a lapse in focus let the United States back into the match, and the momentum began to shift. Then in heartbreaking fashion, the Americans pulled off a dramatic 90th minute equalizer. Andolini was furious. Italy, as they had done so often over the past 2 decades, seemed to be collapsing under pressure on the biggest stage. In extra time, the US nearly completed the comeback, as an effort off the post was inches away from ending Italy's run before Sirigu managed to collect a rebound. Then in the 120th minute, a counterattack saw Mancini play through substitute Insigne, who had a chance to win it at the death, only for a shot to be blocked. And so it came down to penalties, the last thing that Andolini wanted. The shootout now reduced the game to a coin toss. And worse yet, Italy's aging squad was visibly exhausted after 120 grueling minutes. Captain Daniele De Rossi stepped up first and converted. Then the US answered. Candreva made no mistake with Italy's second, and Sirigu followed it up with a massive save on the American second attempt. Next came the young prodigy Mancini, with a chance to take the lead, but his shot was saved. The shootout remained tense with both sides trading goals. Then, with the US's fifth taker stepping up, the game was on the line. He struck it right down the middle, but Sirigu held his ground and made the save. Italy were through and the fans erupted in celebration, but on the pitch, relief was mixed with frustration. The unnecessary drama had drained the players, adding even more minutes on the legs of an already aging squad. After securing their first World Cup knockout stage win in 16 years, Italy were set to face a familiar foe in Spain, a classic matchup between the two nations. Italy entered the quarterfinal clash as clear underdogs, with Spain emerging as one of the favorites in the tournament, after knocking out Brazil and maintaining a perfect defensive record, yet to concede a goal. But all that unraveled after a reckless challenge from Sergio Ramos nearly ended El Shaarawy's tournament, with the forward landing awkwardly and sparking outrage from the Italian bench. Balotelli calmly converted this penalty, giving Italy a shocking 1-0 lead. Then late into the second half, another rash tackle just inside the box saw De Sciglio sent crashing onto his head, in a frightening fall that nearly resulted in a serious injury. Fortunately, the fullback escaped unscathed, but the referee had no choice but to point to the spot once again. Balotelli stepped up and buried his second penalty of the night, stealing a stunning 2-0 victory. Italy had not only knocked out one of the favorites of the tournament, but they were now through to the semi-finals. In the semis, another classic European showdown awaited, Italy versus Germany, the rematch of the iconic 2006 World Cup semi-final, where the Azzurri knocked out the hosts on their own soil. Germany entered the match desperate to reach the final and avenge their painful loss. Italy, on the other hand, had already exceeded expectations under Andolini, a manager initially brought in just to steady the ship. Now he stood on the brink of guiding Italy to an improbable World Cup final. The match was tense and physical, with both sides struggling to find a clear chance. Italy came closest in the second half, when a powerful shot was deflected by Jerome Boateng onto the post, denying an opening goal. But in the 84th minute, it was future Italian captain Lorenzo Mancini who rose to the occasion, heading home across and sending the Azzurri into a late 1-0 lead, and just 6 minutes away from a World Cup final. Yet disastrous strike, as a routine cross into the box should have been claimed easily by Sirigu, but the Italian keeper misjudged it and palmed it weakly into danger. The Germans capitalized and delivered a heartbreaking equalizer that silenced the Italian fans and forced the match into extra time. Extra time produced no winner, and for the second time, Italy would have to survive a penalty shootout, this time against a nation renowned for its prowess from the spot. The shootout began with both sides converting the opening penalties. Then German captain Bastian Schweinsteiger stepped up, only to rattle the post after Sirigu's animated movements on the line appeared to unsettle him. Mancini stepped up next and smashed his shot past Neuer, redeeming his earlier miss against the United States. Sirigu, looking to atone for his own costly error, did just that, diving to the right and denying Mario Gomez. That left Candreva with a chance to win it, and he made no mistake, firing past Neuer and sending Italy to the World Cup final in stunning fashion, defeating the Germans once again in the semi-final, and capping off one of the most improbable runs in tournament history. And in the final, an unfamiliar opponent stood in Italy's way: Belgium. In the years since Italy last featured in the World Cup, Belgium had risen to join Europe's elite with a golden generation packed with world-class talent. Their road to the final saw them defeat South Korea, England, and their neighbors, the Netherlands. As the day of the final arrived, both teams stepped onto the pitch knowing that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a chance to etch their names into footballing immortality. The occasion was immense and so were the lineups. As expected, Belgium's side was stacked with star power. Kevin De Bruyne and Eden Hazard lined up behind Romelu Lukaku. Behind them stood a formidable defense led by Thibaut Courtois in goal, captain Vincent Kompany, and former Milan stalwart Jan Vertonghen anchoring the back line. Yet Andolini was prepared. Italy lined up in his all-reliable 5-3-2 system, the same formation that delivered him 2 Champions League titles. And so the 2022 World Cup final officially kicked off. Belgium came close to striking first, with Axel Witsel forcing a sharp save from Sirigu early on. But it'd be Italy who'd draw first blood. Their new talisman and undeniably the best player of the tournament, Stefan El Shaarawy, started a blistering counterattack with a brilliant through ball. Then he proceeded to sprint nearly 60 yards to finish the very move that he started. He had carried Italy through the group stage, and now on the biggest stage of them all, El Shaarawy had put his country ahead in the final. But sadly, just moments later, a rough tackle from Lukaku saw El Shaarawy land awkwardly on his elbow, forcing him to exit the match prematurely. The man who had brought Italy this far would have to watch the remainder of the match from the sidelines. His injury ignited a tense and physical battle, as both sides began to commit harder tackles as the stakes began to rise. Yet despite Belgium's growing aggression, they failed to find a way past Italy's defense. World-class attacking stars like De Bruyne and Hazard had unfortunately disappeared in the biggest match of their careers. In the end, El Shaarawy's lone strike proved decisive, as the game finished 1-0. Italy were crowned champions of the world for the 5th time, their most improbable triumph yet. For Belgium, it was heartbreak at the final hurdle. For Andolini, it was a defining moment of his career. Captain Daniele De Rossi lifted the World Cup trophy as Italy drew level with Brazil at the summit of world football, both now 5-time champions. It was a triumph no one saw coming. Italy's aging core went out as heroes, and Andolini, who was hired to stabilize the ship, had delivered the World Cup title and had written his name into Italian footballing folklore. As for individual honors, Stefan El Shaarawy was awarded the Golden Ball after his sensational tournament. From carrying Italy through the group stage to scoring the game-winning goal in the final, his impact was undeniable in Italy's World Cup campaign. Meanwhile, Robin van Persie claimed the Golden Boot, scoring 7 goals in a swan song before his international retirement after nearly leading the Netherlands to the finals. Despite Belgium's heartbreak in the final, Thibaut Courtois was awarded the Golden Glove, having kept 4 clean sheets throughout the tournament. And so, after victory celebrations and a hero's welcome parade upon returning to Italy, Andolini's contract with the national team had come to an end. The federation offered him an extension, but Andolini, satisfied with reaching the pinnacle of football, chose to step away and end his storied career on the highest possible note. And for the 3rd and final time, Andolini returned to his vineyard on the countryside of Corleone. With the World Cup trophy now in his hands, his trophy cabinet had grown once more, from 17 to a remarkable 18 pieces of silverware. It was a job well done for an unknown manager from Corleone. He was undeniably among the greatest Italian managers in history now. He became only the 2nd ever manager, alongside the legendary Marcello Lippi, to win the Scudetto, Champions League, and World Cup. He'd gone from unknown to undervalued to undeniable and now unforgettable.